Hey there, tonight we're uncovering how the ancient Israelites survived the vast, unforgiving desert. What you're about to discover is their ingenious use of sparse resources that defies modern expectations. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. The year is roughly 1250 BCE, and you're one of the thousands of ancient Israelites making a grand escape from Egypt. Your feet are blistered, your skin is sunburned, and the desert stretches out before you like an endless sea of sand and survival challenges. Forget the epic Hollywood versions of this story, with triumphant music and Moses looking like a polished hero. This is more like a reality show with very high stakes and no commercial breaks. You're not just moving a few people. Try about 600, 000 men on foot, not to mention the women, children, and livestock. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of herding cats, except the cats are people, and the desert sun is the only thing that's got any mercy. Navigating this logistical nightmare is like trying to organize a music festival entirely on foot, with no Spotify or food trucks in sight. Now let's talk economics, because yes, even in the wilderness, survival has a price tag. You're not exactly rolling in Egyptian gold, and resources are tighter than your sandals. Water is the most precious commodity, more valuable than any treasure Pharaoh could have hoarded. You've got to know where to dig, when to dig, and who might have a spare skin of the good stuff. This isn't just a stroll through the wilderness. It's a test of endurance and resourcefulness that would make even the toughest modern-day preppers break a sweat. Bartering becomes your new best friend and enemy. Need some bread? Maybe you can trade a bit of cloth for it. But keep an eye out. There's always someone looking to shortchange you. In this economy, a few scraps of leather could mean the difference between a full belly and an empty stomach. It's like a never-ending game of Monopoly, except the stakes are your life, and the board is made of sand. Now, onto the manna from heaven. Manna, the miraculous food that supposedly kept everyone going. Legend paints it as a divine all-you-can-eat buffet, but let's dig into the facts. Archaeologists haven't exactly found any leftover manna crumbs lying around, and those ancient texts are a bit vague on whether it was a 6-course meal or just enough to keep you from keeling over. In reality, you're more likely to be munching on whatever desert plants you can forage. Think less Michelin-starred manna, more survival rations. Why does this matter? Because understanding these gritty details gives you a glimpse into the stark reality that shaped the ancient world. It wasn't all miracles and divine intervention. It was a struggle for survival that relied on human ingenuity and sheer willpower. The stories you may have heard are filled with grandeur, but the truth is, this was a journey of endurance, a test of faith, and a real-life lesson in the economics of survival. The political context isn't just a backdrop, it's the whole stage. You're not just fleeing from Egypt, you're stepping into a new identity as a people. This journey is a political statement as much as it is a physical migration. It's about escaping the oppression of Pharaoh and forging a new path. But make no mistake, this isn't a one-way ticket to freedom. It's a long, hard journey with an uncertain destination. The desert is unforgiving, and with limited resources, every decision counts. You're not just surviving, you're setting the stage for a new chapter in history, one fraught with challenges and shaped by the harsh realities of desert life. So, while the legend offers a neat package of miraculous events and divine guidance, the harsh reality is a bit more sobering. It's sweat, grit, and determination, mixed with a little luck and a lot of faith. And as you trudge through the sand, each step is a reminder that survival isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about redefining what it means to endure against the odds. Now, as you shuffle through the sand, each grain seeming to mark your every step, let's dive straight into the brass tacks of desert survival. First up, water. Forget the romantic notion of finding cool, crystal-clear springs around every dune. In reality, the ancient Israelites were more like early hydrologists with a knack for survival than carefree wanderers stumbling upon miraculous waterholes. The Sinai Peninsula isn't exactly known for its hospitality, but with some clever strategies, our ancient ancestors managed to outsmart the desert. Enter the oases, those rare patches of life in a sea of barrenness. These verdant spots were more than just pit stops. They were lifelines. No GPS, no problem. The Israelites relied on their wits, their eyes, and the stars. Yes, the stars. Betelgeuse and Rigel were the ancient equivalent of Google Maps. Knowing your way around the night sky was crucial because, let's face it, asking for directions in the middle of nowhere isn't going to get you far. Finding an oasis was akin to hitting the jackpot, but it wasn't just luck. Knowledge was passed down through generations, mapping out these liquid treasures in oral traditions, kind of like a desert Yelp review minus the app. And once they found water, it was all about rationing. You can't just chug like it's happy hour in the Sahara. We're talking about precise allocation, because in the desert, every drop counts more than a winning lottery ticket. But what if the nearest oasis was a mirage away? Time to get crafty. Enter early desert hydrology. The Israelites dug wells, carefully choosing spots based on subtle hints from the landscape. They were essentially the MacGyvers of the ancient world, turning barren land into a source of life. These wells were strategic, often dug in wadis, dry riverbeds that occasionally filled with water during rare rainfalls. It's like betting on a long shot at the races, only the prize is life itself. Now, while all this survival ingenuity was happening, the social and political dynamics within the tribes were boiling over like a pressure cooker. Picture it, a bunch of tribes, each with their own agendas, quirks and leaders, all trying to steer this mighty caravan towards a better future. It's like trying to run a company where every department thinks they're the CEO. Leadership struggles in the desert were as real as the scorching sun. Moses may be the headliner in this epic saga, but behind every great leader is a crowd of skeptics, advisors, and wannabe leaders. Imagine the board meetings. Moses wants to turn left, Aaron suggests right, and Miriam thinks they should just keep going straight. It's a miracle they didn't end up walking in circles, though some might argue they did. The tension was palpable, and why wouldn't it be? When resources are tight and the stakes are life or death, every decision is scrutinized. It's a bit of a balancing act, managing not just the logistics of survival, but also the egos and aspirations of thousands. One wrong move, and you're not just out of water, you're out of a following. Let's not forget the economic angle here. Even in a nomadic lifestyle, the basics of supply and demand were as cutthroat as a Wall Street trading floor. Trading was essential, but it wasn't a walk in the park. Imagine negotiating for water rights like a modern-day real estate deal. Every drop a precious asset. The value of goods fluctuated based on location, availability, and of course, desperation. The desert wasn't just a backdrop. It was the ultimate test of resilience and resourcefulness. It's a tale of survival, not just against the elements, but within the social and political dynamics that defined this epic journey. And while the legends often gloss over the gritty details, it's these very realities that reveal the true strength and ingenuity of the ancient Israelites. So, while the popular narratives might have you believe it was all about divine intervention and heavenly guidance, the real story is one of human determination and craftiness. As you slog through the sand, remember, each step isn't just a path to freedom. It's a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who dared to dream of a new beginning under the harshest of conditions. Keep your eyes on the stars, your hands in the sand, and your wits about you, because this journey is far from over. And so, as the sand sifts through your toes like a cosmic hourglass, let's talk about the glue that held this whole ragtag operation together. Faith and tradition. Forget the image of Moses as some kind of divine GPS leading the Israelites to the promised land without a hitch. Picture instead a man with a massive weight on his shoulders, caught between divine promises and the grumbling masses. Moses wasn't just a leader. He was the ultimate crisis manager, juggling faith, logistics, and what probably felt like a never-ending complaint box. You see, faith wasn't just a spiritual compass. It was the lifeline in a desert where every day was a roll of the dice. When food and water are scarce, and the sun's doing its best impression of an angry deity, you've got to have something to hold on to, and to religious rituals and traditions. These weren't just spiritual exercises. They were the ancient world's version of team-building activities, keeping morale up and the community tight. Think of it as a collective pep talk with a side of divine intervention. Take the Sabbath, for instance, a day of rest that was more than just a time to kick back and relax. It was a weekly reminder of identity and purpose, a spiritual breather that said, yes, we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're in this together. It was a tradition that offered structure in the chaos, a reminder that even in the desert, they were part of something greater than themselves. And let's be honest, when you're on a never-ending camping trip in the Sinai, any excuse to sit down and not move sounds divine. Now, let's not sugarcoat Moses' leadership with those Ten Commandment tablets and burning bushes. Sure, the guy had his miracles, but leading a nation of restless wanderers was less about parting seas and more about managing a never-ending stream of doubts and demands. Imagine leading a massive caravan through an unforgiving landscape, all while maintaining the spirit of a people used to the comforts of Egypt, no matter how oppressive. It was less Moses, the miraculous leader, and more Moses, the overworked project manager with a divine mandate and a human heart. What about those famous miracles, you ask? Sure, turning a staff into a snake and conjuring water from a rock sounds epic. But in the daily grind, these were less about showmanship and more about survival. They were moments of reassurance, proof that Moses wasn't just another voice in the desert, but someone with a direct line to the divine. Yet, even with these miraculous feats, Moses faced constant scrutiny, like a CEO facing shareholder doubts over quarterly results. The Israelites were a tough crowd, not easily impressed, and forever questioning if the grass, or in this case, the sand, was greener on the other side. Yet through it all, tradition played a dual role, guiding and organizing the masses. Religious festivals weren't just holy days. They were logistical triumphs, bringing people together in a cohesive unit. The Passover, for example, wasn't just a nod to their dramatic escape from Egypt. It was a full-blown organizational feat, a way to unite various tribes under one banner, one story. It was the ancient world's version of a national holiday, complete with symbolic foods and rituals that reinforced community bonds. And let's not overlook the Ark of the Covenant, a portable sanctuary that was both a spiritual centerpiece and a physical reminder of their journey. More than just a fancy box, it was a symbol of the covenant between the Israelites and their deity, carried through the desert like a mobile headquarters of faith. This wasn't just about reverence. It was about identity, a tangible connection to a promise that kept them moving forward when turning back seemed easier. Meanwhile, the practical side of these religious traditions cannot be overstated. They were the scaffolding for social order, ensuring that the community didn't dissolve into chaos. Picture a system where roles were clearly defined, responsibilities shared, and authority respected. Religious leaders weren't just spiritual guides. They were the original community organizers, keeping everyone in line and ensuring that the fragile balance of survival wasn't tipped by disorder. But let's not forget the political undercurrents swirling beneath the surface. Moses might have been the leading man in this desert drama, but he wasn't operating in a vacuum. He had to contend with tribal leaders, each with their own ambitions and followers. It was a delicate dance of diplomacy and leadership, where every decision was a political move, and every miracle had to be weighed against its impact on morale and unity. So, while the romantic tales paint a picture of unwavering faith and miraculous leadership, the reality was far more complex. It was a daily battle against doubt, a testament to human resilience and the power of tradition to sustain a people through the harshest of trials. And as the Israelites trudged onward, each step was a testament to their enduring spirit, a journey marked not just by divine intervention, but by the very human challenges of leading a nation through the wilderness. As we leave Moses and company to navigate their sandy saga, remember that faith and tradition didn't just keep them moving. They were the lifelines that held a fragile community together in the most trying of times. And while the journey was far from over, the lessons of endurance and unity will become the foundation of a legacy that continues to resonate even today. So, keep those sandals on, because the desert trek is still unfolding, and the next chapter promises more twists and turns in this epic tale of survival and identity. And speaking of twists and turns, let's chew over the Israelites' diet, which, spoiler alert, was less banquet of the gods, and more scavenger hunt with a side of desperation. Forget the picture of a divine chef catering a celestial buffet. The reality was a lot grimmer and filled with more question marks than a teenager's text messages. Let's start with the infamous manna from heaven. The biblical narrative paints it as a miraculous, daily delivery of bread-like sustenance. But with archaeology and a little common sense, we can peel back the layers of this tasty tale. No ancient Tupperware filled with leftovers has been found, and experts suggest that manna could have been anything from a type of lichen to insect secretions. Yeah, you heard that right. What might have been perceived as a divine intervention could have very well been the sticky leftovers of some desert-dwelling bugs. Bon appetit. When it came to protein, things got even hairier. Forget about herds of cattle magically appearing over the dunes. Livestock were precious commodities, not a nightly special. It's more likely that the Israelites relied on whatever they could catch or trade for. When you're in the desert, you can't just pop by the nearest ancient butcher. Archaeological digs have uncovered bones of various wild animals, suggesting that hunting played a critical role in their diet. Think less rack of lamb and more lizard on a stick. It's not glamorous, but when your stomach sounds like an angry bear, you don't get picky. Speaking of not being picky, preserving food in a desert is a game of culinary Tetris, fitting limited resources into a survival strategy. The Israelites weren't just munching on whatever they could forage. They had to be creative. Salting and drying meat were lifelines in a world where refrigeration meant sticking it in a cool cave and hoping for the best. Salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was a necessity. Finding salt was like striking oil. It was crucial for preservation and a hot commodity in trade. And let's not forget grains. Ah, grains, the backbone of any ancient diet. Forget the gluten-free craze. Back then, grains were life. Wheat and barley were staples, but growing them in the desert was akin to trying to grow pineapples in Siberia. The Israelites had to rely on trade with nearby settled communities or pick up farming techniques once they reached more fertile lands. Archaeological evidence suggests temporary settlements where they might have grown small crops, but this was more about supplementing their diet than sustaining it. Bread wasn't just food. It was a symbol of survival, needed into existence under the harshest conditions. But here's the kicker. Food shortages were a constant specter haunting their every step. The romanticized notion of self-sufficiency is just that, a notion. In reality, the Israelites faced the relentless anxiety of where their next meal would come from. Imagine waking up each day, not to the smell of fresh coffee, but to the nagging worry of whether today's menu includes anything at all. Yet, out of necessity came ingenuity. The Israelites developed methods to make the most out of their limited resources. They learned the art of food preservation not just for sustenance, but as a currency. Bartering was the name of the game, and knowing how to preserve food meant you had something valuable to trade. It was like having a stockpile of gold, only this time it was salted fish and dried dates. Economic factors played a crucial role here. The Israelites weren't isolated wanderers. They were part of a web of trade routes crisscrossing the ancient Near East. They engaged in trade with neighboring tribes, exchanging goods like leather, textiles, and of course, preserved foods. The Sinai wasn't just a barren wasteland. It was a corridor of commerce, a lifeline connecting them to broader economic systems. Picture a bustling marketplace, not so much a bazaar of abundance, but more a frantic barter exchange, where your next meal depends on your negotiation skills. So, while the narrative of a divinely catered life in the desert is appealing, the gritty truth was a constant hustle for survival. The Israelites' journey was a masterclass in resource management, a balancing act of sustenance and scarcity. They weren't just surviving, they were strategizing, turning every grain, every drop, and every scrap of meat into a calculated move in the game of life. And as we chew on these historical morsels, it's clear that the Israelites' diet was more than just food. It was a reflection of their resilience and adaptability. It was about making the harshest environments work for them, about transforming scarcity into survival. So the next time you sit down for a meal, spare a thought for our ancient ancestors who laid the groundwork for survival under conditions that would make even the most seasoned survivalist break a sweat. But hold onto your plates, because this culinary journey through the desert is just a taste of what's to come. With each step, the Israelites weren't just moving through space. They were carving out a legacy, a testament to human endurance and the relentless quest for a better life. And as we delve deeper into their story, one thing becomes clear. The journey isn't just about reaching the promised land. It's about the lessons learned along the way. As the Israelites trudged through the shifting sands, they were crafting more than just a path to the promised land. They were laying the groundwork for a cultural identity that would endure the test of time. You see, the desert wasn't just a temporary detour. It was a crucible shaping not only their survival skills, but their very essence as a people. And what do we get from this? A society forged in the fires of adversity, where every grain of sand told a story of resilience. Now, when they finally reached Canaan, they didn't just plop down and call it a day. No, they brought with them a toolkit of survival strategies honed in the desert. Think of it as the ultimate relocation package, minus the moving vans. Their experience in the wilderness had taught them the value of adaptability, and they applied these lessons to their new surroundings with gusto. Settlement patterns weren't just random, they were strategic, reflecting a deep understanding of the land and its resources. Archaeological evidence shows that they chose locations with access to water sources and arable land, all those mapless treks across the Sinai Desert finally paying off. But let's not gloss over the social structures that emerged from this sand-swept saga. The Israelites had spent decades as a nomadic people reliant on community cooperation and leadership born from necessity. Once in Canaan, these values were repurposed to build a society that emphasized collective responsibility. Tribal affiliations, which had been crucial for survival during their wandering years, became the blueprint for governance and social organization. Think of it as a game of Survivor, but with less reality TV drama and more long-term planning. Economically, their time in the desert had been a crash course in scarcity economics. They'd learned to make do with what they had, and this mindset carried over as they settled in Canaan. Bartering remained a staple, but they also began to develop agriculture and trade networks, leaning on those early desert lessons of resource management. Grains became the backbone of their economy, and when you've spent years rationing manna and dried meat, cultivating a field of barley must have felt like winning the ancient lottery. Politically, the Israelites' desert experience had created a sense of unity that was both fragile and fierce. The trials they endured together forged a collective memory that became the bedrock of their cultural identity. But unity in diversity is no walk in the park. Disputes didn't just vanish overnight. Yet their shared history of survival offered a common narrative that leaders could use to rally the tribes, even as they navigated the rocky terrain of Canaanite politics. And let's not forget the spiritual dimension. The desert had been a proving ground for their faith, and this spiritual resilience became woven into the fabric of their culture. Rituals and traditions, honed in the harsh conditions of the wilderness, found new expression in the fertile lands of Canaan. The Ark of the Covenant and the Sabbath continued to serve as symbols of their enduring faith and unity, anchoring them in a world that was often as tumultuous as their desert journey. Now, let's unravel how these epic tales were molded over time. The romanticized narratives of divine intervention, while appealing, often overshadowed the gritty reality of survival. Yet these stories served a purpose beyond entertainment. They reinforced a sense of identity and destiny, providing a framework for understanding their place in the world. Over millennia, these tales were told and retold, each generation adding its own gloss, like a long game of historical telephone. But here's where it gets interesting. The stories of the desert became more than just legends. They became lenses through which subsequent generations viewed their own struggles. Every challenge faced by the Israelites in later centuries was interpreted through the prism of their ancestors' desert journey. This wasn't just myth-building, it was identity cementing. In times of hardship, these stories offered hope and a reminder that if their ancestors could survive the desert, they too could overcome whatever obstacles lay before them. So, what does this mean for us? Sitting comfortably in our climate-controlled rooms with more access to information than the Israelites could have ever imagined. It's a reminder that history is both a mirror and a map. The Israelites' journey through the desert is more than just a tale of survival. It's a testament to the enduring power of human resilience and the capacity to adapt in the face of adversity. These stories, both the gritty realities and the romanticized legends, offer lessons in perseverance, unity, and the relentless quest for a better future. In the end, the Israelites' desert experience wasn't just a chapter in their history. It was the prologue to a narrative that continues to unfold. It's a story of transformation, where the harshest of conditions became the catalyst for a cultural metamorphosis. And as we navigate our own deserts, both literal and metaphorical, we can take a page from their sandy saga. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the journey is just as important as the destination. So keep your eyes on the horizon, your feet steady on the path, and remember, every step is a story waiting to be told. In the grand tapestry of human history, the Industrial Revolution is the thread that unraveled the entire wardrobe. This wasn't just a mere upgrade from horses to steam engines. It was the ultimate plot twist that turned the world on its head. So why did this colossal shift kick off in Britain, of all places, in the late 18th century? Was it the endless drizzle inspiring a craving for efficiency, or perhaps just a series of fortunate events colliding like a locomotive on a collision course with destiny? Let's set the scene. The British Isles, a realm of quaint villages, rolling hills and sheep, lots of sheep. But beneath this pastoral charm lay vast coal deposits, the unsung hero of this industrial saga. Coal, that sooty black rock, was Britain's very own magic carpet, ready to whisk society into a new age. With coal, Britain wasn't just burning rocks, it was igniting the engines of change. By 1800, Britain was mining approximately 10 million tons of coal annually, a figure that soared faster than a rocket on launch day. Enter James Watt, the man who turned steam from a kitchen inconvenience into a powerhouse. In 1776, he refined the steam engine, cranking up its efficiency like a techie overclocking a computer. His models were so revolutionary they could run machinery for textiles, mining, and transport, effectively turning water vapor into the driving force of progress. Watt didn't just pave the way, he bulldozed it, leaving a trail of steam and opportunity. But why Britain? Why not France, with its fine wines and revolutions, or China, with its sophisticated innovations? Well, the answer, my friends, is as multi-layered as a Victorian crinoline. For starters, Britain was blessed with a stable political climate, unlike its European neighbors who were busy playing musical thrones. Plus, they had a bustling trade network and colonies that served as both markets and resources. It was like having a global supply chain before Amazon made it cool. The economic landscape was ripe for disruption. Britain's burgeoning middle class had money to spend and a thirst for progress. Landowners, flush with cash from agricultural advancements, were eager investors in these newfangled machines. The Enclosure Acts, which consolidated small landholdings into bigger, more efficient farms, pushed many rural laborers into cities. This migration wasn't just a trickle, it was a deluge, with urban populations skyrocketing. In fact, London's population exploded from about 700,000 in 1750 to over 1 million by 1800, a bustling metropolis of opportunity and soot. Ah, the romantic notion that the Industrial Revolution was a masterstroke of human ingenuity. Sure, it sounds dreamy, a symphony of inventors and entrepreneurs orchestrating progress. But hold the violins, because reality paints a grittier picture. It was as messy as a toddler with a paintbrush, full of trial and error, accidents, and a hefty dose of luck. While Watt was the poster boy for innovation, behind him was a chorus of unsung heroes, tinkerers, laborers, and yes, even those nameless coal miners who toiled deep underground. And let's not forget the steam engine's humble beginnings. Before Watt, Thomas Newcomen had already built a rudimentary engine in 1712, primarily for pumping water out of mines. It was as inefficient as a politician's promise, but it laid the groundwork for Watt's genius upgrades. Watt's steam engine became the Swiss Army knife of the industrial world, versatile and indispensable. Now, was this era just a happy accident or a testament to human brilliance? Perhaps a bit of both. The Industrial Revolution was a wild mix of necessity, opportunity, and sheer determination. It was a time when the adage, necessity is the mother of invention, was more than a cliché. It was a way of life. As Europe watched, Britain harnessed its resources and talents, turning them into a powerhouse that would dominate the 19th century. So here we are, at the dawn of an era that would redefine what it meant to live, work, and dream. The Industrial Revolution was not just a chapter in history. It was the beginning of a new book, one where the scribes used steam-powered pens and coal-blackened ink. And as we peer into the smoky haze of the past, we see not just the grandeur of progress, but also the grime of its making. It was an age born from the fires of coal and the steam of innovation, setting the stage for a world that would never be the same again. And so, the stage was set for one of history's most dramatic acts. The rise of factories and urbanization, a metamorphosis that would make a caterpillar's transformation seem like a minor wardrobe change. Cities swelled like they were on a diet of pure adrenaline, with urban populations ballooning in a span of decades. Manchester, once a sleepy town, grew from a modest 25,000 residents in 1773 to over 180,000 by 1831. That's not just growth, that's a full-blown population explosion. The kind of expansion that makes you wonder if the city planners were fueled by sheer optimism or a reckless disregard for personal space. But let's not get too starry-eyed about this urban boom. With great growth came great chaos, and life in these burgeoning cities was anything but a fairy tale. Factories, the beating heart of this industrial beast, sprouted up like weeds across the landscape. These weren't your charming red brick buildings with ivy-covered walls. They were more like grim fortresses of industry, churning out smoke and noise. Inside, the reality was as harsh as a Dickens novel. Child labor, 14-hour workdays, and working conditions that would make a sweatshop seem like a spa day. Let's talk about those factories. The romanticized vision is one of innovation hubs, glowing with the light of progress. The reality, less glowing, more glaring. Picture cavernous spaces filled with clattering machines, the air thick with soot, and the din of industry. The workforce was a motley crew of men, women, and children, all cogs in the great machine of production. Children as young as 5 were employed to crawl through narrow spaces between machines, their small hands perfect for retrieving fallen threads. It was capitalism's cruel nursery, where the lullabies were sung to the rhythm of the spinning jenny. And why, you ask, were these young laborers not in school, learning their ABCs and dreaming of a brighter future? Because, my friend, necessity had a firm grip on their reality. Families needed every pair of hands to contribute to the household income, and the industrialists were only too happy to oblige with meager wages. By 1833, a Factory Act was passed, limiting child labor to a less appalling 12 hours a day. Progress. Perhaps, but only just. Meanwhile, urban architecture was experiencing its own revolution, though not always for the better. Cities quickly became a patchwork of hastily constructed tenements, factories, and the occasional grandiose building designed to showcase the era's newfound wealth. Take Crystal Palace in London, erected for the Great Exhibition of 1851. It was a shimmering cathedral of glass and iron, a testament to human ingenuity and an architectural flex if there ever was one. Yet, for every Crystal Palace, there were countless cramped and squalid living quarters that housed the working masses. The contrast was as stark as a black and white photograph, highlighting the divide between industrial progress and the human cost of that progress. But let's not throw the baby out with the industrial bathwater. These cities, for all their grit and grime, were also vibrant centers of opportunity. They were melting parts of ideas, cultures, and ambitions, places where people flocked to chase dreams, however elusive. The urban sprawl brought about by the Industrial Revolution wasn't just about factories and smoke. It was about the birth of modern urban life. Streetlights began to illuminate the night. Public transportation networks started to weave their way through the urban labyrinth, and a sense of modernity began to seep into the cracks of the cobblestones. As cities grew, so did the need for infrastructure, and the Victorians were nothing if not ambitious. Take the London Underground, which opened in 1863, a marvel of engineering that remains the world's oldest metro system. Or the construction of the sewers, a less glamorous but equally vital endeavor that helped combat the era's rampant cholera outbreaks. These projects were as much about conquering the challenges of urban life as they were about showcasing human achievement. But let's not kid ourselves. These monumental projects were also about keeping up with the Joneses. Literally, in the case of Britain and its continental neighbors. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about internal progress. It was a race for global domination. Nations were vying for status, power, and influence, and industrial might was the ticket to the big leagues. So, what about those city dwellers who were caught in the whirlwind of change? For many, life was a mix of hardship and hope, a constant balancing act between survival and aspiration. The working class bore the brunt of industrialization's growing pains, but they also became the backbone of a new society. Labor movements began to stir, demanding better conditions and fair wages. The seeds of social reform were sown, though the fruits of their labor would take decades to ripen. In this grand tapestry of urbanization and industrial growth, there lies a fascinating duality. On one hand, the Industrial Revolution was a story of progress, a narrative of human ingenuity and resilience. On the other, it was a tale of exploitation, inequality, and the relentless march of capital over conscience. It's a chapter in history where the heroes and villains were often indistinguishable, where the lines between innovation and exploitation blurred like the soot-filled skies over Manchester. As we continue this journey through the annals of industrial history, remember that the story is far from over. The Industrial Revolution was more than a series of events. It was a catalyst for change that set the stage for the modern world. And while we've only just begun to scratch the surface, there's much more to uncover in the chapters ahead. From the rise of industrial titans to the struggles of the common man, the narrative is as intricate as the machinery that powered it. Stay tuned, because the plot is only thickening, like the fog that once blanketed the bustling streets of a newly industrialized world. As we continue our deep dive into the industrial maelstrom, let's take a moment to address the elephant in the coal-dusted room, the social upheaval that accompanied this era of relentless mechanization. If the Industrial Revolution was a party, it was one where the rich sipped champagne while the working class got stuck cleaning up the mess. The widening chasm between the upper echelons and the working masses wasn't just a gap, it was a gaping canyon, and the repercussions were as volatile as nitroglycerin on a bumpy road. Let's start with the living conditions, shall we? Picture the urban living quarters of the working class as the industrial version of a sardine tin, minus the oil to keep things smooth. Families were crammed into tiny, squalid tenements where privacy was as rare as a day off. Ventilation was more of a suggestion than a feature, making these homes breeding grounds for diseases like cholera and tuberculosis. And let's not even start on the plumbing or lack thereof. Imagine the luxury of indoor toilets. Dream on. Most relied on communal outhouses, adding a delightful aroma to the already fragrant city air. As if that wasn't enough, the working day was a marathon of endurance. 12 to 16-hour shifts were the norm, with laborers slogging away 6 days a week. And for what? A pittance that barely kept food on the table. In 1842, a factory worker might earn around 15 shillings a week, equivalent to about £60 today. Not exactly the golden ticket to prosperity. It was less a living wage and more a survival stipend, where every penny was a lifeline. But here's where the plot thickens. While the upper class was busy perfecting the art of leisure, the working class was waking up to the raw deal they'd been handed. Enter the labor movements, the scrappy underdogs of this industrial drama. These weren't just disgruntled workers. They were revolutionaries with calloused hands, ready to challenge the status quo. The formation of trade unions in the early 19th century was their opening act, a bold move despite being illegal until 1824. These unions were the workers' first attempt at collective bargaining, a concept as radical as wearing socks with sandals. And let's not overlook the Luddite protests, where angry textile workers smashed machines like rock stars, trashing hotel rooms. These 1811-1816 riots were less about tech phobia and more about economic survival, a desperate attempt to protect their livelihoods from the relentless march of mechanization. The Luddites understood that progress was a double-edged sword, one that could just as easily cut them down as lift them up. The epicenter of labor unrest was none other than the infamous Peterloo Massacre of 1819. Picture this: 60,000 people gathering in St. Peter's Field, Manchester, rallying for parliamentary reform. It was a peaceful protest, turned bloody when cavalry charged the crowd, resulting in 18 deaths and hundreds of injuries. The government's response: the 6 Acts, a series of draconian laws aimed at quashing dissent. It was the establishment's way of saying, shut up and keep working, wrapped in a veneer of legalese. But if you thought the working class would take this lying down, think again. The Chartist movement of the 1830 and 1840 took the baton, demanding political reform with a tenacity that would make a pit bull proud. Their People's Charter called for universal male suffrage, secret ballots, and pay for members of parliament, a radical manifesto for its time. Though the Chartists didn't achieve immediate success, they laid the groundwork for future reforms, proving that even the most entrenched systems could be challenged. The interplay of power and resistance during this era was a dance of epic proportions, with each side trying to lead. While the upper class clung to their privileges like a miser to his gold, the working class began to see glimpses of solidarity and strength. The Factory Act of 1833, limiting child labor, was a small victory, a legislative crack in the industrial fortress. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope in a world often shrouded in the soot of exploitation. Now, let's talk about the economic landscape that fueled this social upheaval. The Industrial Revolution was a cash cow for Britain, with its GDP quadrupling between 1760 and 1830. But wealth distribution was about as fair as a rigged carnival game. While industrialists and landowners basked in their newfound riches, the working class was left scrambling for scraps. It was the Gilded Age before the term was even coined, a period of ostentatious wealth that masked the underlying poverty. In this cauldron of inequality, the working class wasn't just a passive victim. They were active participants in the struggle for their rights. In 1847, the 10 Hours Act was passed, reducing the workday for women and children. It was a milestone in labor legislation, a testament to the power of collective action. Yet it also highlighted the glacial pace of reform, where progress was measured in inches, not miles. But let's not forget the other side of the coin. For the industrial magnates, this was a golden era of opportunity. The likes of Richard Arkwright and George Stephenson became household names, their innovations synonymous with progress. Arkwright's water frame revolutionized textile manufacturing, while Stephenson's locomotives shrank distances, turning the world into a smaller, albeit smokier place. These entrepreneurs weren't just riding the wave of industrialization. They were the ones creating the swells. However, the romance of the self-made industrialist was often more myth than reality. Behind the rags-to-riches tales lay a network of investments, connections, and let's face it, more than a bit of cronyism. The industrial titans of the era were as much products of their environment as the machines they built. And while their stories are told in glowing terms, the human cost of their success was a shadow that loomed large. As we peel back the layers of this complex tapestry, one thing becomes clear. The Industrial Revolution was a crucible of change, where the forces of progress and exploitation were in constant conflict. It was a time when the boundaries between innovation and injustice blurred like the smog-filled skies, leaving a legacy as complicated as it was transformative. The social upheavals of the industrial era were more than just footnotes in history. They were the crucible in which modern labor rights were forged. The struggles of the working class weren't just about better wages or shorter hours. They were about dignity and recognition in a world that often saw them as expendable. It was a fight for the soul of a society teetering on the brink of modernity, a struggle that defined an age and set the stage for the battles yet to come. So, as we continue our journey through the annals of industrial history, remember that this is not just a story of machinery and innovation. It's a tale of human resilience, of the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to be mere cogs in the industrial machine. The Industrial Revolution was more than a chapter in the book of history. It was a turning point that reshaped the world and continues to echo through the corridors of time. Keep your seatbelts fastened, because the ride is far from over, and the road ahead is as unpredictable as a factory whistle at quitting time. As the gears of history grind on, we find ourselves at the crossroads where the Industrial Revolution's ripples began to spread beyond Britain's coal-blackened shores. The mid-19th century, the revolution was no longer a British export. It was the world's latest trend, like avocado toast, but with more soot and less nutritional value. The rest of Europe, the United States, and even parts of Asia were catching the industrial fever, fueled by the promise of progress and profit. It was a global game of leapfrog, with nations scrambling to jump on the industrial bandwagon lest they be left in the dusty wake of progress. Let's start with France, Britain's fashionable neighbor across the Channel. While Britain had a head start, France wasn't exactly lounging around sipping wine. By the 1830, French industry was gathering steam, quite literally. The country saw its own surge in coal production, with output skyrocketing from 1 million tons in 1814 to a whopping 5 million by the 1840. French embraced mechanization with a certain je ne sais quoi, focusing on textiles and metallurgy. But industrialization in France had its own flavor, wrapped in a chic package of state involvement and protectionism. The government played sugar daddy to industry, offering subsidies and tariffs to nurture its fledgling factories. It was a mix of laissez-faire and dirigisme, a balancing act that sometimes felt more like a tightrope walk over the Seine. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States was experiencing its own industrial metamorphosis. The young nation was a land of opportunity, or so the brochures claimed, and industrialists were eager to capitalize on its vast resources. By 1860, the U.S. was producing 13 million tons of coal annually, a testament to its burgeoning industrial might. The American version of the revolution had a distinctly democratic twist. Innovation was as American as apple pie, with inventors like Lee Whitney and his carton gin changing the game. The railroads, those iron arteries of progress, crisscrossed the nation, shrinking distances and opening new frontiers. It was manifest destiny with a steam engine, as the U.S. raced to industrialize its way from sea to shining sea. Yet, despite the romantic notion of a global industrial utopia, the truth was far more complex. Industrialization's spread wasn't a universal boon. It was a mixed bag, a Pandora's box of progress and pain. Let's not forget the flip side of this mechanized coin, colonialism. Europe's industrial powers were ravenous for resources, and the colonies were a buffet of raw materials. The British Empire, with its sun-never-setting ambition, was particularly adept at turning lands into assets. India became a jewel in the crown, its carton feeding the hungry looms of Lancashire. But the cost, a devastating impact on India's traditional industries, as local weavers found themselves outmatched by machine-made textiles. It was a tale of economic domination, with the colonies providing the raw inputs while the imperial powers reaped the profits. This exploitative dynamic wasn't reserved for the British. The French, Dutch, and Belgians were all in on the colonial game. The Congo Free State, under King Leopold II of Belgium, stands as a grim example. The rubber trade there was less about free markets and more about forced labor, with horrifying human rights abuses that would make even the most hardened industrialist blush. It was industrial greed at its worst, where the thirst for resources and profit led to atrocities on a staggering scale. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness wasn't just a novel. It was a reflection of harsh realities that were often swept under the colonial rug. Now, let's pivot to the myth of industrialization as a ticket to peace and prosperity. The idea that industrial progress would usher in a harmonious new world was as naive as expecting a cat to walk on a leash. In reality, the competition for resources and markets often sparked conflict rather than cooperation. The Crimean War, 1853-1856, was a classic case of industrial-era geopolitics, with European powers vying for influence in the Ottoman Empire. It was less about honor or alliances, and more about strategic interests, like a chess game played with cannons instead of pawns. On the domestic front, industrialization also sowed the seeds of social unrest. Promise of better living standards was often a mirage, with the working class bearing the brunt of industrial excesses. In the United States, the Gilded Age, circa 1870-1900, was a period of immense wealth and profound inequality, with robber barons amassing fortunes while workers toiled in sweatshops. It was a time when labor strikes and protests became as common as factory chimneys, as workers demanded fair wages and safer conditions. The Haymarket Affair of 1886, where a peaceful rally in Chicago turned deadly, underscored the volatile mix of labor rights and industrial might. And what about Asia? Japan, that ancient land of samurai and shoguns, was undergoing its own transformation. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 marked the beginning of Japan's Industrial Revolution, a state-driven effort to modernize and compete on the global stage. The Japanese embraced Western technology and methods with a fervor that would make a tech startup blush. By 1900, Japan was a burgeoning industrial power, its factories humming with the same mechanical rhythm that had defined Britain's rise. But this rapid modernization came with its own set of challenges, as traditional structures and values were appended in the name of progress. In the end, the global spread of industrialization was a mosaic of triumphs and tragedies, a complex interplay of innovation and exploitation. It was a time when the world seemed to shrink and expand simultaneously, as distances were diminished by technology even as new horizons emerged. The Industrial Revolution was more than just a chapter in the annals of history. It was a seismic shift that reshaped the very fabric of societies across the globe. As we turn the page to explore the next chapter of this grand narrative, remember that the echoes of these industrial transformations continue to resonate today, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. So, as we gear up for the final act of this industrial epic, keep your eyes peeled and your wits sharp. There's more to uncover, more myths to bust, and more stories to tell in this saga of steam and steel. The Industrial Revolution may have been born in the coal mines of Britain, but its legacy and its lessons are truly global. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over, and the next chapter promises to be as riveting as a live wire in a rainstorm. And now, dear listeners, as the curtain draws on the industrial epic, let's take a stroll through the legacy left behind by this era of smoke and steam. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was a tectonic shift that reverberates even today, like a particularly stubborn echo in the canyon of history. So, grab your hard hats and safety goggles. It's time to dissect the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of this industrial juggernaut. First up, let's talk tech. The gadgets and gizmos we take for granted today all have roots burrowed deep in the industrial soil. Take the humble locomotive, for instance. What began as an iron behemoth puffing across the English countryside in the early 1800 has evolved into high-speed trains that zip across continents faster than a caffeinated squirrel on roller skates. By 2023, China's foxing bullet trains boast speeds of up to 350 km/h, a far cry from Stephenson's rocket that maxed out at a mere 48 km/h back in 1829. And then there's the factory system itself, the precursor to modern assembly lines. Henry Ford might have perfected it with his Model T production in 1913, but the concept of dividing labor into specialized tasks was an industrial brainchild that revolutionized manufacturing forever. But hold onto your top hats. There's more. The Industrial Revolution was the granddaddy of urbanization, pulling people from rural pastures into the bustling chaos of city life. By 1900, a whopping 40% of Britain's population lived in urban areas, a staggering leap from just 20% a century earlier. This urban migration sparked innovations in infrastructure that we still rely on today. Sewer systems, public transport, and yes, even street lighting were developed to tame the unruly beast of urban sprawl. London's Metropolitan Railway, launched in 1863, was the world's first underground railway, a blueprint for modern metros that now snake beneath our cities like concrete veins. But let's not gloss over the grimy underside of this industrial coin. The rise of machine and factory came at a human cost that was as steep as it was sobering. Child labor, sweatshops, and the exploitation of workers were not just unfortunate side effects. They were systemic features of industrial capitalism. By the mid-19th century, it was not uncommon for children as young as 6 to toil in textile mills for up to 12 hours a day. The Factory Acts were legislative band-aids on a festering wound, slowly peeling away the harshest realities of industrial labor, but never fully eradicating them. Now, as we sit here, swiping through our smartphones and binging on the latest streaming series, it's worth pondering, how far have we really come? The digital revolution is the industrial revolution's hyperactive great-grandchild, and it's rewriting the rules of work and life just as dramatically. Yet, some things remain eerily familiar. Consider the gig economy, a modern twist on piecework that echoes the precarious labor conditions of the past. The promise of flexibility often masks the reality of instability, a digital age dilemma with roots in the industrial age. But let's not get too bogged down in existential dread. There's a silver lining, or perhaps a silicon one, in the lessons we've learned, or at least should have learned, from our industrial forebears. The same spirit of innovation that powered the steam engine now drives our quest for sustainable energy solutions. As we face the looming specter of climate change, the push for green technology is a nod to the power of human ingenuity. Wind, solar, and hydroelectric energy sources are the new coal mines, offering cleaner alternatives to power our world. In 2020, renewables accounted for almost 30% of global electricity generation, a testament to the transformative potential of technology when guided by conscience. And while we're on the subject of potential, let's not forget the ever-looming specter of future industrial revolutions. The fourth industrial revolution, with its heady mix of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the Internet of Things, promises to reshape every facet of our lives. It's a brave new world where your fridge might reorder milk before you realize you're out. But with great power comes great responsibility, or so the comic books tell us. The challenge is ensuring that these advancements benefit the many, not just the privileged few. The lessons of the Industrial Revolution are clear. Progress must be tempered with caution and guided by ethical considerations. So, what's the takeaway from this whirlwind tour through the annals of industrial history? The Industrial Revolution was a double-edged sword, carving paths to progress while leaving scars of inequality and exploitation. It's a reminder that every technological leap comes with both opportunities and pitfalls, a balancing act that requires wisdom and foresight. As we march into the future, let's do so with eyes wide open, learning from the past to build a more equitable tomorrow. In the end, the Industrial Revolution was more than a chapter in the book of history. It was a seismic shift that redefined what it meant to be human in a world driven by machines. And as we navigate this new digital age, let's keep our feet firmly planted on the lessons of the past. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that progress is a relentless beast, one that must be tamed with caution and guided by the hand of responsibility. So here's to the future. May it be as bold and bright as the dawn of the age of steam, but without the soot and grime that clouded its legacy. You're standing in a dim, cluttered workshop in the heart of a medieval town, and you're not here to admire the decor. The air is thick with the smell of wood shavings and the bitter tang of glue. You're a Fletcher, the somewhat less celebrated cousin of the blacksmith. While knights and archers get all the glory, you're the one ensuring they have something to shoot. Romantic, right? Not exactly. Turns out, being a Fletcher is a bit like being the unsung hero of the Middle Ages, minus the perks, and with a lot more splinters. Every day, you're up at the crack of dawn, not because you're a morning person, but because your livelihood depends on it. Arrows don't grow on trees, despite what some might think. A single arrow can take you several hours to make, and you need to churn out dozens just to make ends meet. The economics of arrow making is about as thrilling as medieval tax records. You're not rolling in gold coins. You're lucky if you can afford a decent ale at the end of the day. Back in the 13th century, a skilled Fletcher could expect to earn about a penny for every dozen arrows. For context, that penny might buy you a stale loaf of bread, or, if you're feeling fancy, a small hunk of cheese. Dream big. Materials are your lifeline, and they're not something you can just pick up at the medieval equivalent of a hardware store. You've got to source your own wood, often yew or ash, which means you know your way around a forest better than a squirrel. But let's not forget about the feathers. Goose feathers are the gold standard, but do you know how many geese you have to chase down to get enough fletching for a single batch of arrows? Spoiler, it's more than you'd like to think. And then there's the glue, which you're making by boiling animal bones and skins. If you thought your job was glamorous, the smell of boiling hide will quickly set you straight. It's a competitive world out there too. The village isn't just bustling with knights and nobles. It's crawling with other Fletchers, bowires, and all manner of craftsmen who'd love nothing more than to steal your customers. You're constantly battling to prove that your arrows are straighter, your fletching is finer, and your tips are sharper. It's a cutthroat business, literally and figuratively. You have to worry about undercutting on prices, and God forbid you decide to skimp on quality. One shardy arrow in the quiver of a nobleman, and your reputation could be shot, pun fully intended. Now, let's sprinkle in a bit of societal context, because why not? You're not just a cog in the war machine, you're also under the thumb of the guilds. These aren't your friendly neighborhood associations. Medieval guilds are more like the mob with better branding. They control who can make what, how much you can charge, and even where you can sell your arrows. Fail to toe the line, and you're not just out of the guild, you're out of the job. Regulations are as stringent as a monk's vows, and you have to keep detailed records of your materials, your sales, and the quality of your work. Think of it as medieval micromanagement with a side of paranoia. Despite the grind, there's a certain pride in your work. You know that every arrow you make could be the difference between victory and defeat on the battlefield. Sure, the knights get the songs and the glory, but without your arrows, they're just guys in impractical armor swinging sticks. You might not have a shiny suit or a horse, but you've got skills that keep armies moving. So next time someone waxes poetic about the noble archer, you can smile knowingly, the unsung hero of the medieval world, working tirelessly in the shadows, with a quiver full of handcrafted dreams and a pocket full of pennies. But let's not wax too poetic, because now it's time to roll up those sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty of just how much it sucked to be a medieval Fletcher. You see, while everyone else was dreaming of knights and dragons, Fletchers were dealing with a much less glamorous reality, the physical toll of their craft. Your average Fletcher didn't just wake up with a stiff neck. We're talking repetitive strain injuries that would make a modern office worker wince. Hammering out arrows day after day, your hands, wrists, and shoulders took a beating that no amount of medieval ale could cure. Forget about ergonomic workspaces. Your desk was a wooden stump, and your chair was wherever you could find a place to sit that wasn't already occupied by stray wood shavings. Your wrists were probably the first to go. Carpal tunnel syndrome wasn't officially recognized until the 20th century, but you can bet that Fletchers knew a thing or two about persistent tingling and numbness. Let's talk about the back pain. Bending over your workbench for hours on end wasn't exactly what the chiropractor ordered. But hey, chiropractors weren't exactly a thing back then. You could try a medieval masseuse, but their idea of a back rub might involve more leeches than lotion. Then there were the eyes. Squinting at tiny arrowheads and feathers in dim candlelight wasn't doing your vision any favors. By the time you hit your 30s, you might have been squinting more than a pirate with a monocle. Eyewear. Not in this century. If you were lucky, you might have had a monocle, but let's face it, that was more of a fashion accessory for the nobles than a practical tool for a working Fletcher. Now, if the physical strains weren't enough, let's sprinkle in some toxic exposure for good measure. The glue you used wasn't exactly Elmer's. Boiling animal bones and skins to create a sticky adhesive meant inhaling fumes that were less than delightful. You might have heard tales of the pungent aroma of a Fletcher's shop, but the reality was closer to a medieval version of a hazardous waste site. And just to add a dash of drama, let's not forget the lead. Yes, lead. Used in the shafts and arrowheads, your exposure to this charming element would make even the most enthusiastic alchemist balk. The cumulative effects of all these hazards. Let's just say that life expectancy for a Fletcher wasn't exactly the longest in the medieval record books. While medieval life wasn't known for its longevity in general, Fletchers had their own special set of risks. Imagine the coughs, the aches, the blurred vision, all par for the course when you're crafting the tools of war in an era that had yet to invent aspirin. And speaking of healthcare, or the lack thereof, medieval medicine was about as effective as consulting a horoscope for medical advice. If you were suffering from any of the ailments that plagued Fletchers, you might have been prescribed a healthy dose of herbal poultices, prayers, or, if you were really lucky, a concoction of questionable ingredients from the local apothecary. Bloodletting was the cure-all of the day, because nothing says healing like losing more blood. Let's not forget that sanitation in the medieval world was more of an afterthought than a priority. Infection was a constant companion, and even the smallest cut could spiral into a life-threatening situation. Sepsis wasn't on anyone's radar, but it was certainly lurking in every nick and scrape. Keeping your tools clean was less about hygiene and more about not wanting to pay for new ones. In the grand scheme of things, Fletchers were just trying to make a living in a world where the odds seemed perpetually stacked against them. Yet despite the aches, pains, and the ever-present threat of lead poisoning, they kept at it. Why? Because in a society where war was as common as a medieval cold, arrows were always in demand. If you could stomach the physical toll and navigate the labyrinth of medieval healthcare, or the lack thereof, there was at least a semblance of job security, in knowing that knights needed your arrows just as much as they needed their steeds. So, as you step back from the shadowy corners of the Fletcher's workshop, remember that this wasn't just any old job. This was a craft, a trade, a necessity. And for all the myth-busting, there's still something undeniably compelling about the Fletcher's world. It's a tale of grit, resilience, and the kind of quiet heroism that history often overlooks. And while you might not envy their splinters or their lead exposure, you can certainly tip your hat to their tenacity. But hold that thought, because there's more to uncover. We've just scratched the surface of the Fletcher's story. There's a whole medieval world to explore, and it's full of intrigue, mystery, and yes, a few more unsung heroes. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the fascinating, and sometimes grim, realities of the past. Just when you thought you'd heard it all about the medieval Fletcher's life, brace yourself. We're about to dive into the high-stakes world of medieval warfare and the relentless demand it placed on our arrow-crafting friends. You see, in the grand chess game of medieval Europe, arrows were like pawns, plentiful, expendable, and absolutely essential. The battles might get the headlines, but behind every epic clash was a legion of Fletchers working like there was no tomorrow. And sometimes, for them, there quite literally wasn't. Let's talk numbers. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415. Ring any bells? Henry V's iconic victory wasn't just a win for the underdog. It was a triumph of archery. The English army, heavily outnumbered, managed to repel the French cavalry and infantry thanks largely to their longbowmen, who reportedly fired around 1,000 arrows per minute. Do the math, and you're looking at tens of thousands of arrows launched during the battle. And who supplied those arrows? Yep, Fletchers. Imagine the pressure of knowing that the fate of a kingdom might hinge on whether or not you could hit your daily production target. Now, before you start thinking that Fletchers were living large with all this demand, hold your horses. More demand didn't mean more money in the bank. The medieval economy had its own version of trickle-down economics, and spoiler alert, it didn't trickle down to the Fletchers. Even as armies clamored for more arrows, the price they were willing to pay often stayed the same, or worse, dropped due to the sheer volume needed. Classic supply and demand, but with a medieval twist of the knife. As if that weren't enough, Fletchers had to deal with the whims of their primary customers, the military. When a king decided it was time to march off to war, every Fletcher in the kingdom was suddenly expected to pull 24-hour shifts. We're talking non-stop production cycles that would make a modern factory foreman blush. And forget about labor rights. This was a time when your overtime pay was the privilege of continuing to work. The pressure was immense. Miss a deadline or deliver subpar arrows, and the repercussions could be severe. Ever heard of getting an arrow in the knee? For a Fletcher, that was less of a meme and more of a career-ending reality. In a society where reputation was everything, a single complaint from a nobleman could ruin your business faster than a bad Yelp review. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was slim. But let's not get too bogged down in the gloom, because there's a certain romance to this relentless grind. Picture it, the rhythmic sound of hammers, the soft scrape of feathers being trimmed, the smell of fresh wood mingling with the acrid tang of glue parts bubbling over open flames. It's a symphony of industry, with Fletchers as the unsung composers. And while they might not have been serenaded by troubadours or lauded in epic poems, their handiwork was crucial to the battlefield's poetry. Fast forward a bit, and you'll find that the demand for arrows wasn't just a medieval quirk. It was an evolving dance with historical events. The 100 Years' War, 1337-1453, was like a long, drawn-out reality TV drama with more chainmail and fewer roses. This epic conflict between England and France was a boon and a bane for Fletchers. Imagine being a supplier whose product is consistent, yet the market is in constant flux thanks to the whims of monarchs and the chaos of war. It wasn't just about making arrows. It was about making them quickly, efficiently, and above all, constantly. This wasn't a job for the faint of heart. The relentless cycle of production and the physical demands of the work meant that Fletchers had to have the stamina of a marathon runner and the precision of a brain surgeon. And speaking of precision, let's not forget that each arrow had to meet strict specifications. Too heavy, and it wouldn't fly right. Too light, and it wouldn't pack the punch needed to pierce armor. Every arrow had to be meticulously crafted, a testament to the artisan's skill and the soldier's reliance on their craftsmanship. But here's the kicker. Despite the vital role they played, Fletchers were often invisible in the grand narratives of war. While kings and generals got statues and songs, Fletchers got blisters and back pain. Their legacy wasn't in grand monuments, but in the quiet knowledge that their work had tipped the scales of history, a bit like the unsung technicians behind the scenes of a blockbuster movie, essential, yet rarely in the spotlight. You might wonder why anyone would choose such a thankless profession. The answer lies in the era's stark realities. In a world where career options were as limited as a medieval menu, being a Fletcher was at least a trade with steady demand. Sure, it wasn't glamorous, but it was a living. And in the unpredictable medieval economy, that was a luxury in itself. Yet, despite the challenges, there was a certain pride in their work. Fletchers knew that their arrows could be the deciding factor in battles that shaped kingdoms. They were craftsmen in a world that valued their skill, even if it didn't always reward it. In a way, their legacy lives on in every story of medieval valor, an invisible thread weaving through the tapestry of history. As we wrap up this chapter of the Fletcher's life, don't worry, there's still more to uncover. Let's take a moment to appreciate the grit and tenacity of these medieval artisans. They might not have been the stars of the show, but without them, the grand dramas of knights and battles would have played out very differently. So next time you hear tales of valiant archers and epic battles, spare a thought for the Fletchers. Their story might not be sung by minstrels, but it's etched in the annals of history, one expertly crafted arrow at a time. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the tale of medieval Fletchers and the world they inhabited. There are more layers to peel back, more myths to bust, and more stories to tell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now that we've given a nod to the Fletchers of yore, it's time to take a closer look at the myth of the medieval craftsman. Spoiler alert. The reality is less artisan dream and more daily grind. All seen those romanticized depictions in paintings and literature. The stoic craftsman, sleeves rolled up, bathed in golden light, as he lovingly creates a work of art. But behind every brushstroke and poetic stanza, there's a gritty truth that makes that romantic image crumble faster than a poorly baked medieval pie. Picture the Fletcher, often overshadowed by the more glamorous blacksmith or the esteemed tailor. These artisans were the rock stars of the medieval world, while the Fletcher was more like the reliable roadie. In tales and tapestries, blacksmiths were often depicted as muscular figures forging mighty swords, while tailors dressed kings and queens in sumptuous fabrics. Meanwhile, our friend the Fletcher was relegated to the sidelines, akin to the drummer in a band, essential yet rarely in the spotlight. Take Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, for example. Chaucer's gallery of characters includes a knight, a squire, a miller, a reeve, but not a single Fletcher. Perhaps Chaucer thought Fletchers too mundane for his colourful cast, or maybe it was just a medieval oversight. Either way, the omission speaks volumes about how Fletchers were viewed in the social pecking order. Their work was vital, but let's face it, arrows aren't as sexy as swords, or as ostentatious as royal garb. The visual arts of the time were equally selective in their glorification. Medieval manuscripts and illuminated texts often depicted workshops filled with bustling craftsmen. Yet, Fletchers were rarely the subject of these artistic endeavors. You could find detailed illustrations of bakers, carpenters, and even cobblers, but the Fletchers' workshop, not so much. Perhaps feathers and glue didn't make for captivating imagery, or maybe Fletchers were simply too busy for a portrait sitting. Either way, their absence is telling. It's essential to understand why these artisans were often overlooked. The medieval economy, much like today's, was driven by demand. While everyone needed arrows, they weren't the luxury items that captured imaginations. Fletchers were producing functional goods, not the eye-catching pieces that made for good art or storytelling. Their arrows were destined for battlefields, not ballrooms. Perhaps that's why they didn't make it into the pages of illuminated manuscripts or the verses of epic poetry. But let's not ignore the romantic appeal entirely. There's a certain allure to the idea of a craftsman, toiling away with dedication and skill, oblivious to the glamour and glory of the outside world. It's a narrative that has persisted through the ages, the noble artisan, the quiet hero. Yet, this tale often glosses over the less than glamorous realities. The calloused hands, the long hours, the painstaking attention to detail. The Fletcher's life was a testament to resilience, but it wasn't the stuff of legends. The truth is, medieval craftsmen were more akin to small business owners than solitary artists. They were entrepreneurs navigating the choppy waters of supply and demand, subject to the whims of market forces and the ever-present pressures of guild regulations. These guilds, as we've touched on before, were less about camaraderie and more about control. They dictated everything from pricing to production methods, and woe betide the craftsmen who dared to step out of line. It was a world of strict rules and rigid hierarchies, where innovation was often stifled by tradition. So why do we cling to the myth of the romantic craftsman? Perhaps it's because we want to believe in the power of individual creativity, even in the face of adversity. Or maybe it's because we love a good underdog story, a lone artisan, armed with nothing but skill and determination, triumphing against the odds. It's a narrative that's deeply ingrained in our cultural psyche, but one that often overlooks the harsh economic realities of the past. The Fletcher's tale is a perfect example. While they weren't the stars of the medieval show, their work was indispensable. Their arrows might not have inspired songs, but they played a crucial role in shaping history. Imagine the Battle of Agincourt without the English longbowmen, or the 100 Years' War without a steady supply of arrows. The Fletcher's contribution may have been unsung, but it was undeniably significant. And therein lies the true romance of the Fletcher's life, not in the gilded depictions of art and literature, but in the quiet, unassuming dedication to their craft. They were the artisans of the everyday, the craftsmen of the commonplace, creating the tools that enabled others to achieve greatness. It's a legacy that's easy to overlook, but impossible to ignore. As we dig deeper into this narrative, let's keep peeling back the layers of myth and legend to reveal the gritty, fascinating reality beneath. Because if there's one thing the story of the medieval Fletcher teaches us, it's that history is as much about the unsung heroes as it is about the celebrated ones. So stay with us as we continue to explore the world of medieval craftsmen, their challenges, their triumphs, and the stories that history almost forgot. Trust me, the best is yet to come. So here we are, ready to wrap up the Fletcher's tale. Just when it seemed that our arrow-crafting artisans were settling into a rhythm, history threw them a curveball that would make even the most skilled archer miss the mark. Enter gunpowder, the game-changing powder that would, quite literally, blow the Fletcher's trade out of the water. The boom of cannons and muskets was about as subtle as a medieval banquet, and it marked the beginning of the end for arrows as the weapon of choice. Let's take a closer look at this seismic shift. By the late 15th century, gunpowder was making its grand entrance onto the European stage, thanks in large part to Chinese innovations that had traveled via the Silk Road. The first recorded use of cannon in England dates back to the early 14th century, but it wasn't until the 15th century that firearms really began to, well, fire up the imagination of military commanders. The Battle of Crecy in 1346 saw the English using cannons to great effect, but it was the gradual rise of the arquebus, a type of early firearm, that really sounded the death knell for the longbow, and by extension, the Fletcher's craft. Now, don't get me wrong, bows and arrows didn't disappear overnight. They still had their uses in hunting and certain military situations. But when you're trying to punch through armor, a lead ball fired from a gun beats a feather-tipped arrow any day. Suddenly, the Fletcher's painstakingly crafted arrows were about as welcome on a battlefield as a jester at a funeral. So what did Fletchers do in response to this technological upheaval? Some adapted, some resisted, and some simply faded away. Those with a knack for innovation might have turned their hands to other crafts, perhaps taking up blacksmithing or even dabbling in the burgeoning world of gun-making. After all, the skills required to make arrows, precision, attention to detail, and a steady hand were transferable to other trades. But for many, the transition wasn't easy. The guilds, those medieval gatekeepers of trade, weren't exactly known for their flexibility. They had spent centuries honing regulations as inflexible as a rusted chainmail suit, and adapting to new technologies was like trying to teach a knight to dance ballet. The economic implications were significant. The demand for arrows plummeted faster than a lead cannonball, and with it went the livelihoods of countless Fletchers. In cities like London, where guilds wielded considerable power, this meant job losses and economic upheaval. The Fletchers Guild, once a formidable force, found itself scrambling to justify its existence in a world that was rapidly moving on. But let's not get too gloomy. While the decline of the Fletcher's trade was undoubtedly a blow to those involved, it was also a testament to the relentless march of progress. The introduction of gunpowder revolutionized warfare, reducing the reliance on skilled archers and shifting the focus to new forms of military strategy. It was a time of great change, and while not everyone adapted, those who did helped pave the way for the modern world. Now, here's where we get to the legacy part of the story. You might think that with the decline of their trade, Fletchers would be relegated to a historical footnote. But their influence lingers on in ways you might not expect. For starters, the craftsmanship of arrow-making contributed to the development of other precision industries. The meticulous attention to detail that Fletchers honed over centuries didn't just evaporate. It seeped into other crafts, laying the groundwork for future innovations. Moreover, the legacy of the Fletcher lives on in our cultural consciousness. Think about it. Even today, the image of the archer is a powerful one, evoking notions of skill, precision, and agility. From Robin Hood to Katniss Everdeen, the archer remains a potent symbol in our stories and imaginations, a nod to the craftsmanship and skill of those medieval artisans who toiled away in dimly lit workshops. And let's not forget the role of the Fletcher in shaping the medieval battlefield. Their arrows, while no longer in vogue, played a crucial role in some of history's pivotal conflicts. The success of battles like Agincourt owes much to the humble arrow, and by extension, to the Fletchers who crafted them. Every arrow fired in anger or defense was a testament to the skill and dedication of these unsung heroes. In the grand tapestry of history, the Fletchers' story is a reminder of the power of adaptation and the inevitability of change. While their trade may have dwindled with the rise of gunpowder, their legacy endures in the echoes of battles fought and won, in the precision of modern craftsmanship, and in the enduring symbol of the archer. So as we conclude this tale, let's raise a metaphorical glass to the Fletchers of medieval Europe. They may not have built empires or sat on thrones, but they left an indelible mark on history with every arrow they crafted. Their story is one of resilience, adaptability, and the quiet heroism of the everyday artisan, a tale worth remembering as we navigate the ever-changing landscape of our own modern world. And there you have it, the tale of the medieval Fletcher, full of grit, determination, and a touch of tragedy. It's a story that reminds us of the intricacies of history and the unsung heroes who, one expertly crafted arrow at a time, helped shape the world we know today. So next time you see a depiction of a valiant archer or hear tales of medieval battles, spare a thought for the Fletchers. They might not have made it into the headlines, but their impact resonates through the ages, a testament to the power of craftsmanship and the enduring spirit of innovation. In the grand tapestry of world history, the kingdom of Axum is like that underrated indie band who played a pivotal role in shaping the music scene, but you only hear about them if you dig deep enough. Nestled in what we now call Ethiopia and Eritrea, Axum was the ancient world's version of a trade show hotspot. We're talking prime real estate here, right along the Red Sea, where the action never stopped. This wasn't just a kingdom, it was a crossroads of cultures, ideas, and yes, some serious trade routes that would have made even the most seasoned Silk Road caravan leader nod in approval. So how did Axum get its start? Well, it wasn't by sitting around and hoping to go viral on ancient Instagram. The kingdom emerged around the 1st century CE, when some enterprising folks realized they were parked right next to the economic superhighway between Rome and India. And if that's not an ideal location for a kingdom, I don't know what is. They didn't just squat there and hope for the best. Axum's early rulers were savvy operators, the kind who could turn a profit even out of a bad situation like finding their elephants had eaten all the frankincense. Speaking of elephants, let's address the pachyderm in the room. These majestic beasts weren't just there for decoration. For Axum, elephants were the original influencers, boosting the kingdom's fame across continents. Picture this, rolling up to a diplomatic meeting with an entourage of elephants. You can bet they made quite the impression. The Romans, who were no strangers to grandeur themselves, couldn't help but be impressed by these living tanks. Elephants were the equivalent of having a fleet of limousines today. They were a statement, a flex of power and wealth that got everyone talking. But let's not forget the real stars of the Axumite economy, the trade routes. Axum was a linchpin in the trade network that linked the Roman Empire to India and beyond. We're talking about a geographical jackpot, a place where spices, gold, ivory, and frankincense passed through like an ancient conveyor belt of wealth. The kingdom's capital, also named Axum, because why complicate things, was a buzzing metropolis that hummed with the sounds of trade deals and the clinking of coins. And what coins they were! The Axumites were among the first in Africa to mint their own currency, featuring the likenesses of their kings, a meticulous mix of propaganda and practicality. These coins weren't just pocket change. They were a PR masterclass. They told the world, hey, we're not just some backwater kingdom. We're a force to be reckoned with. And in an era where most people thought a selfie was something you'd do with a chisel and some patience, having your face on a coin was about as cool as it got. Now, let's bust some myths wide open. There's a romantic notion that Axum was a utopia where everyone held hands and sang Kumbaya while trading goods. The truth is, trade was a cutthroat business, even back then. The kingdom's leaders were as ruthless as they were strategic, willing to go to war to protect their trade interests. They weren't afraid to flex their military muscle when needed, and they didn't shy away from a bit of good old-fashioned annexation when it suited them. These weren't just benevolent rulers. They were shrewd politicians who knew that power came from not just wealth, but the ability to defend it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room again, this time metaphorically. The kingdom's PR was top-notch, but it wasn't all glitz and glamour. For every elephant parade, there were harsh realities. Axum was built on the backs of those who labored tirelessly to keep the trade engine running. It wasn't always a fairy tale. It was a complex society with its own share of social hierarchies and inequalities. But hey, show me a kingdom from the 1st century CE that wasn't. So why does any of this matter? Why should we care about a kingdom that faded into obscurity? Well, Axum was a pioneer, showing the world how trade could be a foundation for an empire. They created a template for economic and cultural exchange that influenced countless civilizations. The kingdom was a key player in the early Christian world, having adopted the religion in the 4th century CE, making it one of the earliest Christian kingdoms. This wasn't just a footnote in history, it was a headline. The rise of Axum wasn't just about geography or elephants. It was about people who saw opportunity where others saw barren land. The kingdom's influence reached far beyond its borders, leaving a legacy that would echo through history, even if it sometimes gets lost in the shuffle of more famous empires. As we continue this journey through Axum's history, keep in mind that this was a place where ambition met opportunity, and the world took notice. The kingdom of Axum shows us that sometimes the most fascinating stories are the ones waiting to be rediscovered. Now, let's dive headfirst into the golden age of Axum, where trade didn't just hum along. It roared louder than a stadium packed with concertgoers waiting for the headliner. Picture the Red Sea as a bustling freeway of goods, with Axum sitting pretty at the toll booth, collecting its dues from every merchant caravan and seafaring trader that dared to pass by. Axum was the Amazon of its day, minus the prime 2-day shipping. But don't worry, they still managed to rack up some impressive 5-star reviews from satisfied customers. Ivory, gold, slaves, and exotic animals. Axum's markets were the ancient world's answer to a big box store. If it was valuable, you could probably find it passing through Axum. And let's not forget the real stars of the perfume world, frankincense and myrrh. These aromatic resins were the equivalent of liquid gold, fueling economies and religious ceremonies from Rome to India. Axum's merchants had their fingers in all these pies, negotiating deals that would make a modern-day Wall Street broker green with envy. Now, let's talk numbers. By the height of its power in the 3rd to 6th century CE, Axum was a heavyweight contender in the global trade arena. The kingdom's reach extended from the Arabian Peninsula down to the Horn of Africa and across the Red Sea into the heart of modern-day Yemen. We're talking about a trade empire that spanned thousands of miles, a bit like trying to manage a chain of Starbucks that stretches from New York to Tokyo without the benefit of an espresso machine. And speaking of colorful characters, the merchants of Axum were the rock stars of their time. Imagine a cast of traders, each with a personality as bold as the wares they sold. These were the people who haggled over the price of elephant tusks one moment and debated the merits of different incense blends the next. They were masters of persuasion, able to talk their way out of a sticky situation or into a lucrative deal. It was a world where charisma and cunning were just as valuable as the goods being traded. But let's not get too caught up in the romance of it all. While it's easy to picture these traders as swashbuckling adventurers, the reality was often less glamorous. The road to riches was fraught with danger, from pirate attacks on the high seas to bandits lying in wait along dusty caravan routes. It was a high-risk, high-reward game, and not everyone walked away a winner. Those who survived, however, often found themselves fabulously wealthy, with enough coin to make even a Roman senator sit up and take notice. This brings us to one of the most persistent legends surrounding Axum, its supposed connection to the Queen of Sheba. This tale has all the trappings of a historical blockbuster: a powerful queen, a wise king, and a fabled journey across deserts and seas. According to the lore, the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon of Israel, a meeting that resulted not just in a fruitful exchange of gifts, but also in the birth of a son, Menelik I, who would go on to establish the Solomonic dynasty in Ethiopia. Now, here's where we play Mythbuster. While it's a story that would make any Hollywood screenwriter salivate, the historical evidence is, shall we say, sparse. The Queen of Sheba is an enigma wrapped in a legend, her existence more a matter of faith than fact. The Bible and Ethiopian tradition offer tantalizing hints, but the archaeological record remains frustratingly silent. The link between Axum and the Queen of Sheba is more a reflection of the kingdom's later Christian rulers seeking to legitimize their reign through a divine lineage than a concrete historical connection. But who can blame them? In a world where power often depended as much on perception as reality, a good story could be worth its weight in gold or frankincense, as the case may be. The legend of the Queen of Sheba lent Axum an air of biblical gravitas, narrative that resonated with the kingdom's conversion to Christianity in the 4th century CE under King Ezana. Talk about a strategic rebranding. This golden age of trade and legend wasn't just about riches and stories, though. It also fostered a melting pot of cultures, languages, and religions, a cosmopolitan hub where ideas flowed as freely as goods. Axumite society was a mosaic of influences, from the Greco-Roman world to the Indian subcontinent, and while the kingdom's rulers spoke jazz, the lingua franca of trade was often Greek, the English of its day, facilitating business deals and diplomatic relations alike. In this vibrant milieu, Axum's influence spread not just through trade, but through the exchange of ideas. It was a place where new religious beliefs mingled with ancient traditions, where the latest fashion from Rome might be seen alongside the intricate textiles of India. Think of it as a silk road of the seas, where the cultural cross-pollination was as valuable as the physical goods being exchanged. Yet, amidst the shimmering surface of wealth and culture, the harsh realities of empire building lingered beneath. For all its prosperity, Axum was a society built on a foundation of inequality, where the spoils of trade were not evenly distributed. The kingdom's elite reaped the lion's share of the benefits, while the laborers and slaves who toiled to keep the trade engine running saw little of the wealth they helped generate. The social hierarchy was as rigid as the stone obelisks that marked the graves of Axum's rulers, impressive monuments to power, but unyielding in their oppression. As we continue our journey through Axum's history, remember that beneath the layers of myth and legend lies a very real human story. It's a tale of ambition and opportunity, people striving to carve out their place in a tumultuous world. The kingdom of Axum wasn't just a footnote in the annals of history. It was a vibrant, dynamic force that helped shape the ancient world in ways that still echo today. But we're just getting started. The story of Axum is far from over, and as we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the forces that eventually led to its decline and fall. Stay tuned. There's plenty more to uncover in this saga of trade, power, and the human spirit. So where were we? Yes, on the cusp of Axum's religious transformation, a historical plot twist that would have made even the most cunning scriptwriters nod in approval. Imagine, if you will, the kingdom of Axum in the 4th century, strutting through the corridors of power with the swagger of a kingdom that was about to redefine its identity. Cue King Ezana, a ruler whose adoption of Christianity around 330 CE wasn't just a spiritual awakening, but a savvy political maneuver worthy of a medieval Machiavelli. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this transformation. Christianity, at the time, was spreading faster than a viral TikTok dance, and Axum was perfectly positioned to catch the wave. This wasn't just about divine inspiration, though. King Ezana saw the writing on the wall, or perhaps the etchings on the stele, and realized that aligning with the burgeoning Christian world could pay off in spades. After all, the Roman Empire, Axum's trade buddy, was also flirting with Christianity under Constantine. What better way to solidify trade ties and political alliances than by sharing a religion? Now, don't get the wrong idea. Ezana wasn't just doing this for the perks of an exclusive club membership. His conversion was genuine, at least as far as historical sources like the inscriptions on Axumite coins and stelae suggest. These artifacts, dating back to his reign, bear Christian symbols and messages, signaling a shift that was as public as it was personal. It was like changing your Facebook status to "in a relationship with Christianity" and inviting the whole world to like and comment. But here's where the story gets even more intriguing. King Ezana's conversion wasn't just a personal rebranding. It was a strategic rollout of Christianity as the state religion. This move helped unify the diverse peoples within Axum's borders, offering a shared identity that transcended local customs and languages. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a multicultural nation forming a national identity around a common set of beliefs. And with this shift came the architectural ambitions that left their mark on the landscape. Axum wasn't content with just a spiritual transformation. They wanted monuments that screamed, "We've arrived." Enter the grand cathedrals and churches, like the famous Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, believed to have been originally constructed during this period. These structures weren't just places of worship. They were statements of cultural and political power, towering above the cityscape like ancient skyscrapers. Now, let's address the elephant in the narthex, the claim that the Ark of the Covenant resides in Axum. This legendary chest, supposedly containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, is said to have been brought to Axum by Menelik I, the purported son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. While this makes for a thrilling story, it's a historical stretch that would make even Indiana Jones raise an eyebrow. There's no archaeological evidence to back it up, but that hasn't stopped it from becoming a cornerstone of Ethiopian tradition and a tourist magnet. In the grand scheme of things, Axum's adoption of Christianity was more than just a religious shift. It was a cultural revolution. It paved the way for Axum to become one of the earliest Christian kingdoms, a status that lent it an air of prestige and legitimacy in the eyes of contemporaries. This was crucial for a kingdom that relied heavily on trade and diplomacy. In a world where who you knew was as important as what you sold, being part of the Christian club opened doors, or at least portcullises, that might have otherwise remained shut. But as with all things, there were growing pains. Integrating Christianity into a society with deep-rooted pagan traditions wasn't all incense and hymns. It required a delicate balancing act between respecting existing customs and promoting the new faith. This is where Axum's rulers demonstrated their political acumen, using Christianity not as a blunt instrument, but as a velvet glove to gently guide their subjects towards a unified identity. Of course, this transformation wasn't solely a top-down affair. The spread of Christianity in Axum was facilitated by missionaries, many of whom traveled along the same trade routes that brought spices and gold. These missionaries were the influencers of their day, spreading the gospel with the zeal of a modern-day Instagram evangelist. Their efforts weren't without challenges, but they managed to plant the seeds of Christianity across the region, creating a spiritual network that paralleled the kingdom's economic one. And let's not forget the role of literacy in this transformation. The introduction of Christianity brought with it a push for literacy and education, as the teachings of the Bible needed to be accessible to the masses. Axum's scholars began translating religious texts into Jez, the language of the kingdom, making Axum one of the few African civilizations of the time to boast a written script. This was a game changer, akin to handing out smartphones in a pre-digital world, empowering people with the ability to communicate and record their own history. But lest we get too swept up in the romance of Axum's Christian conversion, it's worth remembering that this was a kingdom still very much concerned with earthly matters. While the adoption of Christianity offered spiritual solace and cultural cohesion, Axum's rulers remained pragmatic leaders, focused on maintaining their empire's economic and political clout. They continued to mint coins, wage wars, and negotiate trade deals, all while ensuring that their newfound faith reinforced, rather than undermined, their authority. This religious transformation also had long-term impacts on the kingdom's architecture and cultural legacy. The monumental churches and stelae erected during this period became symbols of Axum's enduring influence, landmarks that would inspire awe and reverence for generations to come. These structures stand as testaments not only to the kingdom's architectural prowess, but also to its ability to adapt and thrive in a changing world. As we pause to take stock of Axum's religious and cultural metamorphosis, it's clear that this was a kingdom that understood the power of reinvention. By embracing Christianity, Axum didn't just change its religious landscape. It reshaped its identity and secured its place in the annals of history. This wasn't a fleeting transformation, but a profound shift that would echo through the centuries, leaving a legacy that still resonates today. Yet the story of Axum is far from over. As we look ahead, we'll explore the forces that eventually led to its decline and fall, examining how this once mighty kingdom navigated the challenges of a world in flux. But for now, let's savor this chapter of Axum's history, a tale of faith, ambition, and the enduring human spirit. The kingdom of Axum may have been a beacon of Christianity in the ancient world, but its story is one of universal timelessness, reminding us that even in the face of change, the roots of identity run deep. As we lift the curtain on the decline of Axum, it's worth noting that even the mightiest empires can end up as cautionary tales in history's thick ledger. The Axumites, once the dazzling impresarios of trade, found the economic spotlight fading as new challenges emerged. Picture this, a kingdom with the swagger of a tech startup that suddenly finds itself grappling with a market crash. Indeed, even the best-laid trade routes can hit a detour. First up on the list of Axum's woes is the economic squeeze. By the 7th century CE, the Red Sea, once a bustling highway of commerce, started seeing traffic jams of a different kind. The rise of the Sasanian Empire in Persia and the expansion of the Islamic Caliphate were game changers. These new power players weren't shy about muscling in on Axum's territory, snapping up trade routes faster than you can say hostile takeover. The lucrative links between Rome and India, which had once filled Axum's coffers, were now being rerouted or severed altogether. It's like suddenly finding out your Amazon deliveries are being redirected to your neighbor's house. But let's not blame geopolitics alone. Mother Nature had a say in Axum's fortunes, too. Environmental changes, including deforestation and soil degradation, chipped away at the kingdom's agricultural backbone. Axum's farmers found themselves staring down the barrel of a food crisis, as the land that once yielded bountiful harvests began to betray them. It turns out that when you chop down forests for farmland, it doesn't take long for the soil to rebel. Who knew? It's a lesson in sustainability that modern societies would do well to heed. Speaking of rebellions, internal strife was another thorn in Axum's side. As the kingdom's economy teetered, local leaders and rival factions started eyeing the throne with the kind of ambition that would make a corporate ladder climber blush. The once unified kingdom began to fracture, with regional rulers vying for power in a game of thrones that lacked the dragons but kept all the drama. Central authority of Axum was about as stable as a Jenga tower in a windstorm. And let's talk about overextension, that age-old empire killer. Axum had stretched its influence far and wide, but maintaining such an expansive realm required resources that were suddenly in short supply. When you're juggling an empire, dropping just one ball can spell disaster. Axum's leaders found themselves trying to hold onto territories that were slipping through their fingers like sand. It's a classic case of biting off more than you can chew, a cautionary tale for any leader with grand ambitions but shallow pockets. Meanwhile, the weight of Axum's Christian legacy, which had once been a unifying force, began to crack under the pressures of political and economic instability. While Christianity had brought the kingdom prestige and allies, it also introduced new complexities. Religious dissenters and those clinging to traditional beliefs found their voices in the growing discontent, adding another layer of tension to an already combustible situation. It's the kind of internal division that can turn a unifying creed into a contentious battleground. Amidst all this turmoil, Axum's symbols of power, the soaring stele, the grand churches, stood as silent witnesses to the kingdom's struggles. These monuments, once testaments to Axum's glory, now echoed the hollow ambitions of a bygone era. It's a reminder that even the most impressive facades can't mask the cracks beneath. The mighty obelisks were like Instagram influencers who had lost their followers, still standing tall but with a diminishing audience. But let's not forget the rise of new powers on the global stage. The Islamic Caliphate, stretching its influence across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, was reshaping the political landscape. Their control over the Red Sea and beyond meant Axum's trade routes, the lifeblood of its economy, were being squeezed tighter than a pair of old jeans. This wasn't just a new competitor, it was a tectonic shift in the balance of power. In the chess game of history, Axum found itself outmaneuvered, its queen trapped with no squares left to move. In the end, Axum's decline wasn't a single cataclysmic event, but a slow unraveling. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each small on its own, but collectively devastating. The kingdom that had once been a beacon of trade and culture was reduced to a shadow of its former self, its influence waning as new empires rose to take its place. It's a sobering reminder that the forces of history are as unpredictable as they are relentless, carving new paths even as they bury old ones. Yet, amidst the decline, Axum's legacy endured. The kingdom's contributions to trade, culture, and religion left an indelible mark on the region. The echoes of Axum's achievements can still be heard in the historical and cultural identity of modern Ethiopia and beyond. It's a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who, even in the face of adversity, managed to leave a lasting imprint on the world. As we pause to consider the rise and fall of Axum, it's clear that this ancient kingdom offers lessons that resonate far beyond its temporal bounds. It's a tale of ambition and opportunity, of triumph and tragedy, and of the eternal dance between power and vulnerability. The story isn't over yet, and in the final chapter, we'll explore how Axum's legacy continued to shape the world long after its decline. So stay tuned, because history has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. And so here we are, standing at the crossroads of memory and myth, where the kingdom of Axum's legacy beckons us to take a closer look. While the kingdom's decline might read like a how-not-to guide in empire management, Axum's story is far from a mere cautionary tale. In fact, it's a veritable buffet of lessons served with a side of historical charm. So, grab a seat. There's plenty to chew on. First, let's digest Axum's contribution to the world of trade. They didn't just set up shop along one of the ancient world's busiest intersections. They practically invented the idea of a global marketplace. Axum was a trailblazer in the art of commerce, a proto-Amazon with a shipping network that spanned continents. In a world without emails or overnight shipping, that's a logistical feat that deserves a standing ovation, or at least a polite golf clap. Their minted coins, adorned with images of kings and Christian symbols, circulated far and wide, serving as both currency and a not-so-subtle reminder of Axum's reach and influence. They were like the original brand ambassadors, spreading the Axumite brand across the known world. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. The reality of Axum's economic prowess was less about heartwarming tales of bustling markets and more about shrewd business acumen. This was a kingdom that knew how to play the game, leveraging its strategic location to squeeze every last coin out of the trade routes. They were the toll booth operators of the ancient world, and they weren't afraid to charge a premium. Sure, it's not as poetic as a kingdom of benevolent traders, but hey, history often trades poetry for profit. Moving on from commerce, we can't overlook Axum's cultural and religious impact. By embracing Christianity, Axum positioned itself as one of the earliest Christian kingdoms, a move that was both bold and pragmatic. Christianity offered a unifying identity that helped consolidate power and fostered a sense of communal belonging. This was a kingdom that understood the power of a shared belief system, not just as a spiritual anchor, but as a political tool. Axum's adoption of Christianity wasn't just a religious conversion. It was a masterclass in cultural rebranding. And while the tale of the Ark of the Covenant might be a stretch, it underscores how Axum used narrative to bolster its standing. A good story, after all, is worth its weight in gold, or maybe frankincense. But here's where we peel back the layers of myth to reveal the gritty reality beneath. While the kingdom's religious transformation was undoubtedly significant, it didn't magically erase the inequalities and tensions within Axumite society. The elites, perched atop the social ladder, enjoyed the fruits of trade and religion, while the majority of the population toiled in the fields or served in other less glamorous roles. It's a dynamic as old as civilization itself. The few thrive while the many labor, a pattern as predictable as it is persistent. So, why should we care about Axum today? Well, beyond the historical intrigue and the occasional elephant parade, Axum offers a timeless lesson in adaptability and resilience. This was a society that knew how to pivot, how to embrace change without losing its core identity. Axum's story is a reminder that the only constant in history is change, and that those who adapt are the ones who leave a mark. It's a narrative that resonates with modern states facing their own challenges, whether they be economic, environmental, or cultural. Moreover, Axum's rise and fall highlight the cyclical nature of history. Empires rise, reach their zenith, and eventually decline, only to be followed by others. It's a dance as old as time itself, where the steps remain the same even if the dancers change. Axum's legacy is a cautionary tale for any modern power that believes itself invincible. The kingdom's story warns against overextension, the pitfalls of environmental neglect, and the dangers of internal division. It's a sobering reminder that even the most formidable empires can crumble if they lose sight of the foundations that support them. Yet, amidst the ruins of Axum's decline, the kingdom's cultural and religious contributions endure. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church traces its roots to Axum, its traditions and beliefs shaped by the kingdom's early adoption of Christianity. The architectural marvels, from the towering stelae to the ancient churches, stand as testaments to Axum's enduring influence. These relics of a bygone era serve as a bridge between past and present, connecting modern Ethiopians to their rich heritage and offering visitors a glimpse into a world that once was. In the grand tapestry of history, Axum is more than a footnote. It's a chapter that reminds us of the complexity and nuance of human civilization. It's a tale of ambition and opportunity, of triumph and tragedy, and of the eternal dance between power and vulnerability. Axum's legacy may be shrouded in the mists of time, but it continues to echo through the ages, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a people who dared to dream, and for a time made those dreams a reality. So as we close the book on the kingdom of Axum, let's carry its lessons with us, for the past is never truly gone. It's merely waiting to be rediscovered. If you ever thought your city gets a bit chaotic, let's take a hard left into Babylon around 1792 BCE, where Hammurabi was about to make his grand entrance. The city was a bustling hub of trade and commerce, nestled right next to the Euphrates River. Picture a place that smelled of clay, sweat, and ambition, with a side of goat. This wasn't just any place, though. Babylon was the kind of city that had more mud bricks than you'd find on a Monty Python set, and Hammurabi was born into the heart of it. Now, for those of you keeping count, Hammurabi was born into an era when bronze was the iPhone of its day. Shiny, slightly impractical, and everyone wanted a piece. Drop that in a city like Babylon, where everyone's trying to outdo each other with the latest tech, by which I mean sharper swords and sturdier chariots, and you've got a recipe for both progress and chaos. Politics in Babylon could make Game of Thrones look like a friendly neighborhood watch meeting. Kings came and went, often with as much ceremony as a poorly planned toga party. Hammurabi's ascent wasn't exactly a straight shot to the top. He was born to Sin-Muballit, a king whose name sounds like a sneeze, but don't let that fool you. The guy had a knack for snatching up territory like it was on clearance. By the time young Hammurabi was cutting his teeth on the political scene, Babylon was already a bit of a patchwork quilt of conquered lands and uneasy alliances. Picture a king who had to manage a coalition of tribes like a dysfunctional family reunion, and you're getting close. The economics of the time weren't exactly glamorous, either. The city thrived on agriculture, which meant Hammurabi had to pay attention to things like irrigation canals and crop surpluses. Imagine explaining to a young prince that the secret to power might just be a really efficient water management system. Not exactly the stuff of legend, but crucial if you didn't want the populace revolting when the barley ran dry. Hammurabi, ever the pragmatist, understood that power wasn't just handed to you on a silver platter. You had to be part diplomat, part warrior, and part accountant. Babylon's economy was a busy mix of farming, trade, and a little bit of let's conquer the neighbors for more resources. But Hammurabi was savvy enough to realize that you couldn't run a kingdom on swordplay alone. You needed laws, and eventually he would become famous for them. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back in these early days, he was just a young ruler with a head full of ideas and a city full of expectations. The political landscape was as complex as the city's irrigation system. City-states surrounded Babylon like a group of cats eyeing the same bowl of milk. There were the Elamites, who had a habit of popping over for a spot of raiding, and the Larsa, who fancied themselves the big shots of the region. Hammurabi was going to have to deal with all these players, and he knew it. Hammurabi's early years on the throne were less about smashing enemies and more about careful chess moves. He had to solidify his rule in a place where alliances were as stable as a mud brick in a monsoon. This guy didn't just stroll into power. He calculated every step. You could almost imagine him sitting in his palace, which, by the way, was probably a lot more drafty stone than luxurious marble, pondering which alliance to forge next as he watched the Euphrates flow by. And here's a nugget of reality. Being a king back then didn't mean lounging around in luxury. You were more like a juggler, trying to keep a dozen balls in the air while someone kept tossing you flaming torches. Hammurabi had to deal with everything from tax collection to military strategy, all while ensuring the guards were on his side. In a world where divine favor could make or break you, Hammurabi had better have been on good terms with the local priests. Life in Babylon wasn't all doom and gloom, though. There was trade to be had, and the city was a buzzing marketplace of goods and ideas. Traders brought in copper from Cyprus, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and plenty of gossip from everywhere else. The city's economy was a delicate balance of imports, exports, and hoping nobody decided to torch the place in a fit of conquest. So here we have young Hammurabi, a king in a land of opportunity and peril, trying to carve out a legacy that would outlast even the longest drought. He was about to embark on a journey that would see him become one of the most famous lawgivers of the ancient world. But for now, he was just trying to keep his head above water in a world that was as unpredictable as the Euphrates River during flood season. That's where we'll leave him for the moment, on the cusp of greatness, with the city of Babylon as his stage and the ancient world as his audience. Hammurabi, standing on the cusp of greatness with Babylon as his stage, was about to embark on the most ambitious chapter of his reign, expanding the influence of his burgeoning kingdom. And let's get one thing straight. Expansion wasn't just about flexing military muscle or collecting new territories like stamps. It was about strategy, diplomacy, and managing the kind of logistical nightmare that would make a modern-day city planner break into a cold sweat. You see, Hammurabi wasn't just a king with a shiny crown. He was a tactician who could probably give Sun Tzu a run for his money. The man understood that to expand Babylon's influence, he needed to be both the carrot and the stick. Now, the carrot here wasn't just some metaphorical idea of goodwill. It was real, tangible benefits, like trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. For instance, Hammurabi forged alliances with city-states using carefully negotiated treaties that were about as watertight as you could get in the ancient world. These alliances were like ancient insurance policies. They promised help in times of war and ensured that trade routes remained open, bringing in that sweet lapis lazuli and copper. But let's not kid ourselves. The stick was very much a part of Hammurabi's strategy, too. Warfare in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't like those romanticized paintings you see of chivalrous knights and noble battles. It was gritty, brutal, and often came down to who could outlast whom. Hammurabi led military campaigns that were as much about psychological warfare as actual sword fighting. He knew that the sight of his army on the horizon could send shivers down the spine of any city-state thinking about defying Babylonian rule. One of Hammurabi's military campaigns that stands out was against the city-state of Larsa. Larsa was the proverbial thorn in Babylon's side, a rival that needed to be dealt with. In 1763 BCE, Hammurabi's forces moved against Larsa, and it was less about a grand, bloody siege and more about strategic brilliance. Hammurabi cut off Larsa's access to water, a critical resource in the Mesopotamian landscape, essentially squeezing the city into submission. It's a bit of a harsh lesson in hydrology. Control the water, control the city. The eventual victory over Larsa was less about swords clashing and more about demonstrating that logistics could be as powerful as any army. Now, expanding an empire wasn't just about accumulating territories like some ancient real estate mogul. It was about maintaining them. And here's where the headaches really started. Hammurabi had to manage a vast territory that was about as stable as a toddler on a sugar high. Each city-state within his growing empire came with its own set of rules, customs, and let's face it, egos that had to be stroked or crushed, depending on the situation. This was no small feat. We're talking about a sprawling empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Zagros Mountains, each region with its own dialects, guards, and local politics. The man had to be a master of logistics, ensuring that his army could move quickly across vast distances, distances that, mind you, could take weeks to traverse on foot or by chariot. Supplies had to be transported, soldiers fed, and morale maintained. It wasn't glamorous, but these were the gears that made the Babylonian machine run. And if Hammurabi was the face of the empire, the cogs were the countless scribes, messengers, and quartermasters who kept things ticking. It's a bit like being a rock star. You might be the one on stage, but without the roadies, you're just a guy with a microphone. But let's not gloss over the challenges. Maintaining control over such a wide area meant dealing with constant threats of rebellion and the occasional insubordination from local governors who fancied themselves mini-kings. Hammurabi had to be a master of both diplomacy and intimidation, keeping these local rulers in line with a mix of gifts and, when necessary, good old-fashioned threats. It was like running a corporate empire where the shareholders were armed and occasionally tried to overthrow the CEO. And while we're on the subject of maintaining order, let's talk about the economy. Hammurabi knew that an empire wasn't just held together by military prowess. It needed a stable economy. He improved infrastructure, ensuring that canals were built and maintained to support agriculture, the beating heart of the Babylonian economy. He also standardized weights and measures across his empire, which might sound about as exciting as watching paint dry, but it was crucial for trade and taxation. When everyone is on the same page about how much a bushel of barley weighs, things run a lot smoother. In this grand game of empire building, Hammurabi was both player and referee, a leader who understood that power came not just from the sword, but from the quill and scales as well. His ability to balance warfare with diplomacy and expansion with management was nothing short of a high-wire act. And while the legends would later paint him as a near-mythical figure, the reality was more complex and infinitely more fascinating. Hammurabi was not just a conqueror. He was an administrator, a diplomat, and yes, a bit of a showman, building a legacy that would echo long after the last brick of his empire had crumbled. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. There's more to this story, as Hammurabi's ambitions were far from fulfilled. As he looked out over his empire, his mind was already turning to the next challenge, the next opportunity to secure Babylon's place in history. And so, with a head full of plans and a kingdom that stretched as far as the eye could see, Hammurabi was ready for whatever the ancient world could throw at him next. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss what comes next in the saga of Babylon's most famous lawgiver. As Hammurabi pondered his next move in the grand game of empire building, he knew that force and diplomacy alone wouldn't cement his legacy. Enter the Code of Hammurabi, a legal marvel that was both a breakthrough and a masterpiece of ancient PR. Think of it as the world's first big legal download, and Hammurabi was the guy who went viral. Comprising 282 laws etched onto a stele like Mesopotamia's version of a billboard, the code was meant to be seen and admired, a testament to Hammurabi's wisdom and justice. But was it really about fairness, or more about cementing his rule? Let's dig in. First, a quick detour into the Code of Hammurabi 101. This wasn't just a random list of thou shalt nots. No. It was a sophisticated set of laws that covered everything from trade and theft to marriage and slavery. And yeah, it was a little heavy on the eye for an eye justice, a phrase that stuck around longer than fruitcake at Christmas. But before you get misty-eyed about Hammurabi's pioneering spirit, consider this. Not everyone played by the same rules. The code was hierarchical, with different penalties for nobles, commoners, and slaves. In today's terms, it was like having separate speed limits for luxury cars and beat-up jalopies. Let's take a closer look at some of these laws and what they reveal about Babylonian society. For instance, if a builder constructed a house that collapsed and killed the owner, the builder was put to death. Harsh, absolutely. Effective. Well, you can bet that Babylonian builders double-checked their measurements. This law underscores the societal importance placed on skilled labor and accountability, a concept that still resonates today, even if our modern legal systems prefer hefty fines over chopping block justice. But here's where Hammurabi's brilliance shines through. This code wasn't just about rules, it was about control. By codifying laws, Hammurabi wasn't just bringing order to chaos, he was weaving himself into the very fabric of society. Each law was a thread in a tapestry that proclaimed his divine right to rule. The stele itself was topped with an image of Hammurabi receiving the laws from Shamash, the sun god. Talk about a power move. Who's going to argue with a king who has celestial backing? Now, let's address the elephant, or should I say the ziggurat, in the room. Was the code of Hammurabi truly fair? Here's where we separate the romantic from the realistic. In truth, fairness was a slippery concept in 18th century BCE Babylon. The code was less about justice for all and more about maintaining order and hierarchy. For instance, the infamous eye for an eye principle wasn't applied equally. If a nobleman poked out a commoner's eye, he paid a fine. If the tables were turned, the commoner lost an eye. Justice, like beauty, was in the eye of the beholder, or the social class in this case. Hammurabi's legal code also reflected the economic realities of the time. Babylon's economy was heavily reliant on agriculture, trade, and yes, slaves. The laws were designed to protect property and commerce. For instance, if a man rented a field and neglected to farm it, he had to pay compensation in the form of barley. This wasn't just about punishing idleness. It was about ensuring the economy kept ticking along. Think of it as ancient Babylon's way of saying, time is barley. All this legal brilliance wasn't just a product of Hammurabi's desire to be the ancient world's version of Judge Judy. It was strategic. By creating a unified code, Hammurabi was able to consolidate his power over the sprawling territories he had so meticulously acquired. The code served as a tool to integrate these diverse regions, each with their own customs and laws, under a single Babylonian umbrella. It was a clever bit of statecraft, ensuring that everyone, from the bustling markets of Babylon to the far-flung fields, knew who was in charge. But let's not kid ourselves. This was also an exercise in spin. Hammurabi was an early master of propaganda, using the code to portray himself as a fair and just ruler. The stele was not just a legal document. It was a monument to Hammurabi's greatness, strategically placed in public spaces where it could be seen by all. It was a message in stone. I am Hammurabi, bringer of justice, and you are lucky to have me. It was as much about legacy as it was about law, ensuring that Hammurabi's name would be remembered long after he was gone. And in that sense, it worked like a charm. So, while the Code of Hammurabi might not have been the egalitarian document some might wish for, it was undeniably effective. It provided a framework for resolving disputes and laid the groundwork for future legal systems. And in doing so, it solidified Hammurabi's position as one of history's most influential lawgivers. But don't let the romanticized image of a benevolent monarch cloud your judgment. Hammurabi was a ruler first and foremost, and the code was a tool for securing his rule. In the end, the Code of Hammurabi tells us as much about the man behind it as it does about the society it governed. As we wrap up this chapter of Hammurabi's story, it's clear that his code was more than just a list of do's and don'ts. It was a strategic masterpiece, a reflection of its time, and a testament to the art of governance. Hammurabi's legacy as a lawgiver is secure, but our journey with him isn't over yet. There are still more twists and turns in the saga of this remarkable ruler. So stick around as we continue to unravel the story of Babylon's most famous king. Because if there's one thing we've learned so far, it's that in the world of Hammurabi, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. As Hammurabi's legacy of lawgiving took root, it was time to switch gears and dive into the nitty-gritty of Babylonian life under his rule. If you thought ancient Babylon was all about grandiose laws and epic battles, think again. It was also about the mundane, the clink of a merchant's coins, the scratch of a farmer's plow, and the daily grind that made up the lifeblood of this ancient metropolis. Welcome to the socio-economic engine room of Babylon, where trade and agriculture weren't just activities, they were survival. Start with the merchants, those ancient entrepreneurs with their eye on the prize. Babylon wasn't just a city. It was a thriving hub of commerce, a kind of ancient Wall Street with a lot more dust and fewer suits. Situated along the Euphrates, Babylon was ideally positioned for trade routes that stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Think of it as the Amazon of the ancient world, only with more camels and no prime delivery. Goods like textiles, grains, and metals flowed in and out like the river itself. Babylonian merchants were the masters of the barter, trading everything from copper to that ever-popular lapis lazuli, a blue gem that was the bling of its day. But here's the kicker. Trade in Babylon wasn't just about goods changing hands. It was about navigating a complex web of tariffs, taxes, and tolls. Hammurabi's economic policies ensured that every transaction added a little something to the royal coffers. Merchants were subject to regulations that would make a modern-day CPA break into a cold sweat. For example, Hammurabi's code decreed specific fees for shipping goods along the river. If a merchant accidentally sank a boat full of grain, guess what? He was on the hook for the loss. Talk about ensuring your cargo was shipshape. Now, let's turn our gaze to the backbone of Babylonian society, the farmers. These guys weren't just growing crops. They were the unsung heroes of the ancient economy. Agriculture was the beating heart of Babylon, and it all revolved around one thing: water. In a land where the difference between feast and famine was a well-maintained irrigation canal, farmers knew that their livelihood depended on channels that snaked across the landscape like ancient arteries. Hammurabi had a vested interest in keeping these waterways flowing, because a well-fed populace was a happy populace, or at least a less rebellious one. Hammurabi's policies required farmers to maintain these crucial canals, with the threat of fines or worse if they neglected their duties. Imagine explaining to a farmer that the secret to prosperity wasn't just a good harvest, but keeping the waterways clear of silt. Hardly the stuff of legend, but absolutely essential if you wanted to avoid a riot over bread prices. And speaking of bread, barley was the king of crops, the staple of every Babylonian diet, and the currency of choice for paying debts and taxes. So, the next time you grumble about income tax, spare a thought for ancient farmers who had to hand over bushels of barley to keep the taxman at bay. But life in Babylon wasn't all sowing and trading. The city was a vibrant tapestry of artisans, scribes, and laborers, each playing their part in the grand symphony of urban life. Artisans crafted everything from pottery to jewelry, while scribes kept the wheels of bureaucracy turning with cuneiform tablets that recorded everything from tax records to epic poetry. Picture a society where writing was a superpower, and the ability to read and inscribe those little wedge-shaped characters elevated you to a status of near wizardry. Now, let's pull back the curtain on the less glamorous side of Hammurabi's Babylon, the economic challenges. Despite the city's prosperity, Babylon wasn't immune to the pitfalls of an agrarian economy. Droughts, floods, and the occasional locust plague could turn a bumper crop into a disaster movie faster than you could say irrigation failure. And while Hammurabi's laws provided some safety nets, like debt relief during bad harvests, these measures were about as comforting as a mud brick pillow when your livelihood was at stake. Then there was the issue of social inequality. Babylonian society was a layered cake, but not the delicious kind. At the top were the elites, priests, nobles, and wealthy merchants who enjoyed the lion's share of resources. Meanwhile, commoners and slaves did the heavy lifting, often under less than ideal conditions. Hammurabi's laws, as comprehensive as they were, couldn't erase the stark divides. They merely managed them, using justice as a tool of control rather than a path to equality. All right, time to bust a myth. The romanticized vision of Babylon as a utopia of wisdom and wealth is just that, a fantasy. Beneath the veneer of prosperity lay a society grappling with the same challenges we face today: economic disparity, resource management, and the constant struggle for stability in a world that could be as unpredictable as a Babylonian thunderstorm. Sure, Hammurabi's policies brought order and growth, but they also laid bare the fragility of a system that teetered on the edge of chaos. As we wrap up this snapshot of Babylonian life, remember that Hammurabi's reign wasn't just about laws and conquests. It was about the delicate dance between prosperity and survival, a balancing act that demanded the full spectrum of his kingly skills. In the end, Hammurabi's Babylon was a city of contrasts, a place where the bustling markets and fertile fields masked the ever-present challenges of ancient urban life. And while the king's legacy would endure, the realities of daily life in Babylon were far more complex and gritty than any romantic tale would have you believe. But don't hang up your historian's hat just yet, because there's more to explore in the saga of Hammurabi. His story is far from over, and as we continue this journey, we'll delve deeper into the intricacies of his reign, the innovations that marked his time, and the legacy that would echo through history long after the last brick of Babylon had crumbled to dust. Stay tuned, because in Hammurabi's world, the only constant is change, and there's always another chapter waiting to be written. As Hammurabi's Babylon danced its delicate past adieu with prosperity and survival, the curtain was starting to draw on Hammurabi himself. This king, who had spent decades weaving the fabric of an empire, was about to face the ultimate equalizer, mortality. King Hammurabi, the Lawgiver, warrior and strategist, died around 1750 BCE. Let's be real here, folks. For all his achievements, he couldn't conquer time. Now, before you start imagining a peaceful end in a serene palace suite, picture something a little less glossy. Hammurabi's final days were likely consumed with the kind of administrative headaches that would make a modern CEO consider early retirement. As he shuffled off this mortal coil, he left behind a kingdom that was more like a precariously balanced Jenga tower than a solid fortress. His death marked the beginning of a slow, inexorable unraveling, as the empire he'd painstakingly stitched together began to fray at the seams. But before we dive into the decline, let's take a moment to chew over Hammurabi's legacy. Was he truly the wise lawgiver history remembers him to be, or just a savvy ruler who knew a thing or two about branding? The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. Hammurabi's code was revolutionary, no doubt about it. It provided a framework that influenced not only Mesopotamian society, but also laid the groundwork for future legal systems. This wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was the ancient world's equivalent of a viral tweet that just kept on trending. However, and it's a big however, the romantic notion of Hammurabi as a champion of justice needs a reality check. His laws reinforced a rigid social hierarchy and were often more about maintaining control than doling out fairness. The eye for an eye principle wasn't about justice. It was about keeping the peace in a world where dissent could spiral into chaos faster than you could say cuneiform. In the end, Hammurabi's genius lay not just in his codification of laws, but in his ability to sell those laws as divine mandates. Now, onto the decline. Following Hammurabi's death, the empire didn't crumble overnight. It was more of a slow leak than a dramatic collapse. His successors, notably his son Samsu-iluna, inherited a kingdom that was already starting to feel the strain of its own weight. Samsu-iluna's reign was marked by rebellion and economic downturns. If Hammurabi had been the empire's architect, Samsu-iluna was the unfortunate handyman trying to patch up the cracks with nothing more than a roll of duct tape. One of the key issues was the empire's sheer size. Governing such a vast territory required more than just a strong grip on the sword. It needed a deft touch with the quill. Local governors, once kept in line by Hammurabi's mix of charm and intimidation, began to see opportunities for independence. Rebellions erupted like weeds in a neglected garden, particularly in the south, where city-states like Uruk and Isin decided they'd had enough of Babylonian babysitting. Economically, the empire suffered from what you might call a Bronze Age recession. The once thriving agricultural system began to falter under the pressure of overexpansion and resource depletion. Hammurabi's irrigation projects, while revolutionary, couldn't account for the increased salinity of the soil, a problem that sapped the land's fertility like a leech on a fat camel. The result? Crop yields plummeted, trade slowed, and the treasury was left looking as bare as a Babylonian desert landscape. And then there were the Elamites, those perennial thorns in Babylon's side. Taking advantage of the empire's weakening grip, they launched raids into Babylonia, further destabilizing the region. Samsu-iluna found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts, and without his father's knack for strategic brilliance, the flames proved too many to douse. By the time his reign ended, Babylonia was a shadow of its former glory, still standing, but in desperate need of a facelift and a serious workout regimen. So, where does this leave Hammurabi in the grand tapestry of history? Was he a visionary leader, or just another ambitious ruler whose reach exceeded his grasp? His reputation as a lawgiver is firmly etched in the annals of history, but it's crucial to remember that his code was as much about consolidating power as it was about dispensing justice. In the end, Hammurabi was a man of his times, a king who understood the power of image and the necessity of control. As we close the book on Hammurabi, his story serves as a potent reminder of the complexities of leadership and legacy. History often paints its heroes and villains in broad strokes, but the truth is always more nuanced. Hammurabi wasn't just a legend or a myth. He was a ruler navigating the choppy waters of power and politics, trying to keep his empire afloat amid the storms of ambition and adversity. In a world where the past often feels distant and abstract, Hammurabi's story resonates with the timeless truths of human nature: the drive for order, the allure of power, and the inevitable march of change. His legacy, both romanticized and realistic, is a testament to the enduring dance between myth and reality. So, as we bid farewell to Babylon's most famous king, let's take a moment to reflect on the echoes of his reign that still reverberate through the corridors of history. In the end, Hammurabi's greatest achievement may not have been his laws or his conquests, but the enduring question of how we choose to remember him, a question as relevant today as it was 4 millennia ago. In the bustling corridors of time, where civilizations rise and fall like overly ambitious tech startups, the ancient Mayans emerge as the original celestial coders. While today's tech giants are busy trying to convince us that a smartwatch can solve all our existential crises, the Mayans were charting the heavens with a sophistication that would make even the most advanced smartwatch look like a glorified sundial. And who needs a reminder to stand up when you've got a calendar that predicts solar eclipses with the accuracy of a Swiss watchmaker? Let's start with the Mayan calendar system, a marvel of mathematical wizardry and cosmic foresight. Picture a calendar that doesn't just tell you when your next meeting is, but one that intricately maps out celestial events, tracks the agricultural cycle, and even marks the birthdays of the gods. This wasn't just a Google calendar. It was the entire operating system of the universe. And at the heart of this system was the long count calendar, a timeline that would make even the most dedicated planner reconsider their life choices. The long count calendar was the Mayans' way of tracking time over vast periods. Forget about your yearly planner. This thing was all about the long game. It's composed of several cycles, the most prominent being the Bedtime, which lasts about 26 years. The Mayans would have scoffed at our obsession with fiscal quarters. They were planning in blocks of nearly 4 centuries. To put that into perspective, that's like making a plan today and expecting it to wrap up around the year 2417. Talk about commitment. But how did they pull off such a feat? Mathematics, my dear Watson. The Mayans were rocking a base 20 or Vigesimal number system rather than our base 10, which might explain why they were so good at thinking big. They didn't just stop at counting fingers and toes. They took it to a whole new level. Their use of zero, a concept that wouldn't hit European shores until centuries later, was revolutionary. This allowed them to perform complex calculations and track celestial events with a precision that would make a modern-day data analyst envious. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. The 2012 apocalypse myth. Remember when everyone was convinced that the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar supposedly said so? Spoiler alert, it didn't. The so-called end of the world was simply the end of a Bedtime, just another cycle in the endless loop of time. It was like reaching the end of a very long, very elaborate board game and realizing you're just supposed to start over, not flip the table. The Mayans would probably have had a good chuckle at our expense, sipping their cacao and wondering why we were so keen on a doomsday that simply wasn't in the cards. But let's not just remember the Mayans for a non-apocalypse. Their astronomical prowess was light years ahead of its time. These ancient stargazers, without so much as a telescope, managed to align their temples and pyramids with celestial bodies, turning architecture into a cosmic calendar. They tracked Venus with a dedication that would make any modern astronomer proud, using it to help predict harvests and plan wars. Venus, not Mars, was the planet of war for the Mayans. That's right, They were divining battle plans from a celestial body that glows serenely in the evening sky. It's like planning your tactical maneuvers based on where the North Star twinkles. Their observations of celestial events, like solar and lunar eclipses, were spot on, allowing them to weave the natural and supernatural into a single narrative. The Mayans saw these events as divine phenomena, messages from the gods themselves. Imagine if every solar eclipse today came with a presidential decree. The Mayans didn't just watch the skies. They listened to them, integrating their findings into their religion, politics, and everyday life. The Mayans, in their infinite wisdom, knew that time was a dance of cycles, a series of interconnected rhythms set by the stars. While we obsess over seconds and minutes, they were orchestrating a cosmic symphony that linked heaven and earth in harmony. This celestial ballet made them the original astronomers of Central America, with an understanding of the cosmos that was as much about spirituality as it was about science. Their legacy reminds us that while we may have advanced technologically, there's an ancient wisdom in seeing the bigger picture, a wisdom that sometimes gets lost in the noise of our modern lives. In the end, the Mayan calendar wasn't just about marking time. It was about understanding one's place in the universe. So next time you glance at your smartwatch, remember, the Mayans did it first, and they did it with style. And while your watch might tell you when to breathe, their calendar told them when the universe was breathing. Speaking of cosmic style, let's shift our gaze from the Mayan calendar to their architectural wonders, which were as grand as a celestial opera. If the stars were their sheet music, then their cities were the concert halls. We're talking about structures so impressive that even modern architects might break into a sweat just trying to figure out how they pulled it off. Welcome to the world of Mayan architecture, where pyramids were the skyscrapers and limestone was the steel. Let's kick things off with Tikal, a city that was less of a metropolis and more of an epic saga carved in stone. Tikal wasn't just a place, it was a spectacle, a Mayan version of Broadway, but with more jaguars and fewer jazz hands. This city, nestled in the Guatemalan jungle, boasted over 3,000 structures, with its crown jewel being the Temple Roman IV pyramid, standing at a staggering 70 meters, or 230 feet for those of you who still measure things in football fields. It was the tallest pre-Columbian structure in the Americas. To put that in perspective, it would take about 116 average-sized humans stacked on top of each other to reach the top. Talk about a Stairmaster workout. But how did they do it? How did the Mayans, without cranes or bulldozers, create such monumental grandeur? The answer, my friends, lies in limestone and a lot of human elbow grease. Limestone was the Mayan go-to building material, and they had it in abundance. It was the ancient equivalent of having an endless supply of Lego bricks, except these bricks weighed several tons each. The Mayans didn't just slap together stones. They meticulously cut and polished them, using nothing more than stone tools and an enviable amount of patience. And let's not forget the plaster they used to coat these structures, a concoction so durable that some of it still clings to the ruins today, thumbing its nose at the elements like it's got something to prove. Now, let's wander over to Palenque, another testament to Mayan architectural prowess. While Tikal was all about vertical ambition, Palenque was the master of intricate design and artistic flair. Located in modern-day Chiapas, Mexico, Palenque isn't as large as Tikal, but what it lacks in size, it makes up for in sophistication. The Temple of the Inscriptions, the site's most famous structure, is a 9-step pyramid that houses the tomb of the great ruler Pakal. This wasn't just a burial site. It was an architectural love letter to the gods and a message to future generations that said, "We were here, and we were awesome." But here's the kicker. Building these grand cities came with a hefty price tag. No, the Mayans didn't have a currency system like we do today, but the cost of constructing these structures was paid in resources and human labor. The labor force, often composed of farmers during the off-season, was crucial. It was like a seasonal gig economy, where instead of delivering food, you were lugging massive stones and constructing architectural wonders. And let's be real, no one was getting health benefits from this gig. This brings us to a rather intriguing question. Did the Mayans have their own version of urban planners, or were they just really ambitious masons with divine inspiration and a penchant for geometry? While the jury's still out on whether they had official city planners, what's clear is that these cities were meticulously organized. Streets were laid out with precision, Plazas were strategically placed, and the orientation of buildings often had astronomical significance. This wasn't just slapdash construction. It was urban planning with a celestial twist. Despite their architectural genius, the Mayans did not escape unscathed from the environmental toll of their ambitions. The construction of these massive cities required vast amounts of timber, not just for building, but for burning limestone to create plaster. This, in turn, led to deforestation, soil degradation, and eventually contributed to the decline of their civilization. It's a tale as old as time, human ambition outstripping environmental capacity. Sound familiar? The Mayan cities were more than just places to live. They were political centers, economic hubs, and religious meccas. They were the beating hearts of Mayan civilization, each city a testament to the power and vision of its rulers. But let's not romanticize it too much. Behind the grandeur was a society grappling with the same issues we face today: resource management, urban sprawl, and the ever-present threat of running out of room to build those darn pyramids. It's a reminder that while we may have swapped limestone for steel and stone tools for power drills, the challenges of urban planning remain remarkably unchanged. As we stroll through these ancient cities, it's important to remember that while the Mayans were building for the gods, they were also building for themselves. A legacy carved in stone, a defiance against the ravages of time. These architectural feats were a declaration of existence, an echo from the past that says, we mattered, we thrived, and we left our mark. In a world where cities rise and fall like tides, the Mayan architectural achievements remind us of the enduring human desire to create, to innovate, and to build something that lasts beyond our own fleeting lifetimes. So next time you find yourself gazing up at a modern skyscraper, remember the Mayans and their towering pyramids. They may not have had elevators, but they knew how to reach for the heavens with style and purpose. And while we've moved on to steel and glass, the Mayans built with the stars in their eyes and limestone in their hands, leaving a lasting legacy that continues to inspire and amaze us today. And now, dear listener, we pivot from the grandiosity of Mayan architecture to the vibrant world of Mayan art and pottery, the ancient equivalent of an Instagram feed that wasn't just about pretty pictures, but a canvas for their culture, politics, and social hierarchy. Forget scrolling through selfies and brunch photos. Imagine a scroll of vibrant murals and intricate ceramics, each piece a snapshot of life in a civilization where art was as much a social statement as it was an aesthetic pleasure. Let's start with those murals, shall we? These were not your average wall decorations. Mayan murals were a riot of color and storytelling, a kaleidoscope of scenes depicting everything from daily life to mythological events. Take the Banampak murals, for example. Discovered in the Chiapas region of Mexico, these murals are like a graphic novel splashed across the walls of a temple. They depict everything from ceremonial rituals to bloody warfare, offering a window into the Mayans' world that's as detailed as a 1,000-word essay, but way more colorful. The Mayans didn't just paint the town red. They used every hue imaginable, creating works that practically screamed, "We were here, and we painted our truth." But these murals weren't just for decoration. They were a tool of political propaganda, a way for rulers to flex their power and remind everyone who was in charge. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a strategic PR campaign. They were meant to impress, intimidate, and instill a sense of awe. Kind of like how a modern billboard might convince you that buying a particular brand of soda will somehow make your life infinitely better. Murals were an art form with an agenda, and that agenda was power. Now, let's talk pottery, those functional yet fabulous artifacts that were the bread and butter, literally and metaphorically, of Mayan daily life. Mayan ceramics were more than just vessels for food and drink. They were status symbols, a way to show off your wealth and taste. The fancier the pottery, the higher your social standing. Imagine hosting a dinner party where your plates and cups are the talk of the town. Back then, a beautifully crafted pot could be worth a small fortune, or at least a couple of goats, depending on the barter system of the day. These ceramics were decorated with intricate designs, often depicting gods, mythical creatures, or scenes from Mayan mythology. They weren't just pretty to look at. They were storytelling devices, much like those murals, but on a more intimate scale. Drinking from a Mayan cup wasn't just quenching your thirst. It was engaging with the narrative of your culture with every sip. Picture that the next time you reach for your morning coffee mug. But here's the kicker. Crafting these ceramics was no walk in the park. It was a labor-intensive process that required skill, patience, and a keen eye for detail. The clay had to be mixed just right, the shapes meticulously formed, and the designs painstakingly painted before being fired in a kiln. It was an art form that demanded dedication and expertise, much like a master chef perfecting a dish. And the Mayans didn't just stop at functionality. They pushed the boundaries of creativity, experimenting with form and function in ways that would make any modern designer swoon. Speaking of creativity, let's not forget the economic side of things. Mayan artisans were not just artists. They were entrepreneurs, operating in an economy where art and commerce were intertwined. A piece of Mayan pottery wasn't just a pretty object. It was a commodity, a product to be traded and sold. The quality of the ceramic often determined its value, and a skilled artisan could command quite a price for their work. It was a world where art was both a luxury and a livelihood, a testament to the Mayans' understanding of the economic power of creativity. But what about the myths, you ask? Ah, yes, the romantic notion that every Mayan artisan was a lone genius, toiling away in isolation. The reality, however, is a bit more complex. While individual talent was certainly celebrated, much of Mayan art was a collaborative effort, with workshops producing pieces for the elite and the masses alike. It was art by committee, guided by tradition and the demands of the market. So much for the tortured artist stereotype. In the grand tapestry of Mayan civilization, art and pottery were not mere decorations, but vital threads that connected the people to their culture, their gods, and each other. They were expressions of identity, tools of power, and commodities of trade, all rolled into one. As we admire these ancient works today, it's easy to romanticize them as relics of a lost world. Yet, behind the beauty and craftsmanship lay a practical reality. Art was a business, an integral part of the social and economic fabric of Mayan life. So, next time you find yourself in a museum, gazing at a piece of Mayan pottery or a mural fragment, remember the stories they tell and the hands that crafted them. These artifacts are more than just remnants of the past. They are echoes of a civilization that understood the power of art to shape, define, and elevate the human experience. And while we may no longer barter pottery for goats, the legacy of Mayan art reminds us that creativity and commerce have always been two sides of the same coin, spinning through history and leaving their mark on the world. And so, dear listener, we transition from the visually striking world of Mayan art to the equally intricate universe of Mayan writing, where hieroglyphs spun tales longer than your average Netflix series. If you've ever felt limited by Twitter's character count, spare a thought for the Mayan scribes, who managed to condense complex narratives into beautifully carved symbols. Their writing system was less about brevity and more about weaving epic sagas into stone and bark, ensuring their stories outlasted even the most resilient battery life. The Mayans didn't just scribble for fun. Their writing was a sophisticated tool for preserving history, broadcasting propaganda, and of course, keeping up with the ruling elite's equivalent of the Kardashian-Jenner clan. Imagine their codices as the pages of a high-stakes historical drama filled with tales of heroism, betrayal, and divine intervention. These were not just dusty old books. They were the Netflix originals of their time, binged by those lucky enough to read them. Now, let's talk about codices, the Mayan answer to e-readers, but with significantly fewer downloads and a lot more fire hazards. The Mayans crafted these screenless wonders from bark paper, which they covered with vibrant glyphs and images. Each codex was a tapestry of knowledge, encompassing everything from astronomical charts to royal genealogies. Sadly, only 4 of these magnificent manuscripts survived the Spanish colonization, the rest falling victim to the fiery zeal of invaders who preferred converting souls to preserving stories. Talk about a plot twist no one wanted. The surviving codices, the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices, each have a story to tell. Take the Dresden Codex, for example, an 11th century artifact that's a veritable encyclopedia of Mayan astronomy. It contains detailed observations of Venus's cycles, calendars, and even some handy horoscopes. This codex is the astrophysicist's dream journal, showcasing the Mayans' celestial savvy long before Neil deGrasse Tyson made space sound cool. But these codices weren't just for academic pursuits. They were political tools wielded by the elite, like a gilded megaphone. In a world where power was as much about public perception as it was about prowess, the Mayans used writing to craft narratives that elevated rulers to god-like status. Hieroglyphs sang the praises of kings and queens, emphasizing their divine right to rule, much like a well-curated Instagram feed projecting flawless lifestyles. The scribes, masters of their craft, were the PR agents of the ancient world, spinning tales that kept the ruling class firmly on their thrones. Take, for example, the reign of Cainish Jannar-Pakal, also known as Pakal the Great. His legacy was immortalized not just in stone, but in the very words that described his conquests and divine lineage. The Mayan scribes were not just chroniclers, but architects of history, ensuring that Pakal's name would echo through the ages. They were the storytellers who knew that the pen, or in this case, the chisel, was mightier than the sword. A particularly interesting aspect of the Mayan writing system is its adaptability. While they had around 800 glyphs at their disposal, only about 200 were regularly used. These glyphs could represent sounds, words, or concepts, allowing for a flexibility that made their writing both complex and nuanced. It was as if every Mayan scribe was a linguistic jazz musician, riffing on themes and variations to create something unique and expressive. This wasn't just writing, it was a performance. Now, let's address the romantic notion of the lone scribe, hunched over a stone tablet, etching out history one glyph at a time. While it's a charming image, the reality was a bit more communal. The creation of Mayan texts was often a collaborative effort involving multiple artisans, each contributing their expertise to the final product. It was less about individual genius and more about a collective endeavor, where the whole truly was greater than the sum of its parts. Think of it as the ancient version of a writer's room, where ideas were shared and honed to perfection. Of course, all this literary brilliance wasn't without its practical side. Writing, like art, was a commodity. Scribes were highly valued members of society, their skills essential not just for historical record-keeping, but for the daily administration of city-states. They were the bureaucratic backbone of the Mayan world, ensuring that taxes were collected, laws were recorded, and decrees were issued. It was a system that recognized the power of the written word and wielded it with precision. But here's the rub. For all their literary prowess, the Mayans didn't leave us a Rosetta Stone. Deciphering their writing has been a long and arduous journey, akin to piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Scholars have only recently begun to fully unlock the secrets of their glyphs, revealing the depth and complexity of Mayan civilization. It's a testament to the enduring allure of a mystery, the kind that keeps historians and archaeologists up at night, eyes wide with curiosity and perhaps a touch of envy. In debunking the myths surrounding Mayan writing, we find a civilization that was as much about communication as it was about conquest. Their glyphs were not just symbols, but voices from the past, echoing through time with tales of triumph and tragedy. They were the messengers of their era, ensuring that the stories of the Mayan world would endure long after the last stone temple had crumbled. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of Mayan hieroglyphs, one fact becomes clear. These ancient scribes were the original wordsmiths, crafting narratives that transcended the boundaries of time and space. Their writing was an invitation to explore a world where words had the power to shape reality, where stories were the lifeblood of a civilization. So, as we continue our journey through Mayan history, let's remember that the pen, or the chisel, was not just a tool, but a window into the soul of a people who understood the power of storytelling. And there we shall pause, on the cusp of discovering more about a civilization that wrote its own future as deftly as it chronicled its past. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of the Mayan world, one glyph at a time. Just when you thought we'd exhausted the Mayans' bag of tricks, let's fast forward to the present and explore how their ancient achievements ripple through our modern world like Wi-Fi signals across a crowded coffee shop. Sure, the Mayans didn't leave us with a handy manual on how to build pyramids or predict eclipses with a flick of the wrist, but their legacy is alive and well, stealthily infiltrating our science and art like a historical ninja. First up, let's talk astronomy, the cosmic playground where the Mayans first flexed their intellectual biceps. You see, their astronomical observations weren't just spot on. They were stellar, pun intended. The Mayans tracked celestial bodies with an accuracy that's left modern astronomers picking their jaws off the floor. Take Venus, for example. The Mayans didn't just casually glance at it through a telescope. They meticulously charted its movements, predicting its cycles with such precision that they could rival any modern-day astronomer armed with a state-of-the-art observatory. This wasn't just stargazing. It was high-stakes cosmic calculus, providing the bedrock for today's astronomical calculations. And while we're on the subject of stars, let's not forget the Mayan calendar. Despite the 2012 Doomsday debacle, this intricate timepiece continues to fascinate scientists and historians alike. The long count calendar, with its uncanny ability to predict solar and lunar events, has become a subject of study in understanding ancient timekeeping and its influence on modern chronometry. It's as if the Mayans left us a celestial cheat sheet, challenging us to decipher its complex rhythms and cycles. Now, let's descend from the stars and plant our feet firmly on the ground, on the fertile soils of art and architecture. Mayan aesthetics have made their mark in contemporary art, influencing everything from muralism to sculpture. Their vibrant murals, with their bold colors and intricate designs, serve as inspiration for modern artists seeking to capture the dynamism and storytelling prowess that the Mayans perfected. You might say that the Mayans were the original content creators, their works echoing through galleries and street art in a vibrant testament to their enduring influence. And what about those awe-inspiring architectural feats? Their pyramids and palaces have become blueprints for modern architectural marvels. The Mayans' keen understanding of structural engineering and design has inspired architects to incorporate elements of their genius into contemporary projects, from sustainable urban planning to innovative building techniques. It's as if the Mayans handed us the keys to a treasure trove of architectural wisdom, daring us to unlock its secrets. But before we get too swept up in the romance, let's address the Hollywood elephant in the room. You know, the one wearing a feathered headdress and wielding a calendar like a doomsday weapon. While films and TV shows have done their fair share of mythologizing Mayan civilization, often painting it with broad strokes of drama and fantasy, the reality is far more nuanced. Sure, Hollywood loves a good apocalypse narrative, but the truth is that the Mayans were more about continuity than cataclysm. The end of a Bacton wasn't an end at all. It was a new beginning, a testament to their belief in cycles and renewal. So, would the Mayans be proud of their Hollywood portrayal? It's hard to say. On one hand, they might chuckle at the cinematic embellishments, appreciating the creative liberties taken with their legacy. On the other, they might raise an eyebrow at the oversimplification of their complex culture, much like how one might react to a biopic that glosses over crucial details in favor of flashy visuals. But let's be real. If the Mayans had known about CGI, they probably would have used it to add some extra pizzazz to their murals. In debunking the myths, we find that the Mayans' true legacy is far more remarkable than any Hollywood script could convey. Their achievements in astronomy, art, and architecture were not mere flashes in the pan. They were enduring contributions that continue to influence and inspire. They remind us that while civilizations may rise and fall, the echoes of their contributions can resonate through time, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. And let's not ignore the economic realities that underpinned these achievements. The Mayans were masters of resource management, their economy a complex web of trade networks that spanned the Mesoamerican world. They traded goods like obsidian, jade, and cacao, each transaction a testament to their savvy in navigating the economic tides. This wasn't just bartering. It was a sophisticated system of commerce that laid the groundwork for modern economic practices. Their ability to harness and distribute resources was crucial to their success, a reminder that even the most brilliant achievements require a solid foundation. As we wrap up our exploration of the Mayan legacy, it's clear that their cultural influence extends far beyond the ruins of their cities. They were a civilization that understood the power of innovation, the value of knowledge, and the importance of storytelling. They remind us that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the lessons we learn and the wisdom we pass on. In a world obsessed with the next big thing, the Mayans teach us to appreciate the beauty of cycles, the elegance of balance, and the enduring power of creativity. So, dear listener, as you drift off to the land of dreams, let the legacy of the Mayans inspire you. Remember that even in the face of collapse, Their achievements continue to illuminate our world, guiding us like a constellation in the night sky. Their story is a testament to the resilience of human creativity, a reminder that while civilizations may fade, their contributions endure, waiting to be rediscovered and celebrated by those who come after. And who knows, perhaps the next time you look up at the stars, you'll see a little bit of Mayan wisdom shining back at you, a cosmic wink from a civilization that knew how to dream big and aim for the heavens. In the bustling chaos of ancient Rome, where cobblestones crooned under the weight of history and toga-clad citizens crowded the forum with the latest political gossip, a boy named Hadrian was busy sharpening his Greek. Yes, you heard right. While his peers were likely more concerned with dodging their Latin lessons, young Hadrian was falling head over sandals for all things Greek. Born in Italica, in what is now Spain, around 76 AD, Hadrian wasn't just another Roman lad dreaming of chariot races and the glory of the Senate. He was about to become one of Rome's most architecturally ambitious emperors, but not without a few twists and turns along the way. Hadrian's rise to power was anything but a straight line. His path was more like a meandering Roman aqueduct, impressive but full of unexpected detours. Adopted by Emperor Trajan, who was a distant cousin and the reigning big cheese of Rome, Hadrian had to navigate the murky waters of imperial politics. It wasn't all wine and roses, trust me. Trajan, despite being a top-notch emperor, didn't publicly name Hadrian as his successor until the 11th hour, reportedly on his deathbed in 117 AD. Talk about cutting it close. Some even whisper that Trajan's wife, Plotina, might have had a hand in making sure the paperwork was in order. Ah, Roman politics. A Game of Thrones long before the Starks and Lannisters made it cool. But back to our man, Hadrian, who, upon donning the purple toga of imperial power, was more than just a pretty face in the Roman hierarchy. Here's a guy who, unlike many of his predecessors, had a bit of an architectural obsession. While most emperors were content with flaunting their military conquests, Hadrian preferred wielding a compass and straight edge. He's the guy who looked at Rome and thought, you know what this place needs? A facelift. And facelift he did, but not without first setting off on an empire-wide road trip, the likes of which would make a rock band's world tour look like a weekend getaway. Over his 21-year reign, Hadrian traveled extensively throughout the Roman Empire, covering distances that today's frequent flyers would envy. From Britain to Egypt, Hadrian was there, shaking hands, inspecting troops, and sketching out his next big architectural project. It's said he spent over half his reign outside Italy, which might explain why his travel budget could put a modern CEO's expenses to shame. Hadrian's Greek passion wasn't just an academic fling, it was a full-blown love affair. He wore a beard, which was a Greek thing, sharking the clean-shaven Roman elite, and he even spoke Greek more fluently than Latin. His enthusiasm for Greek culture was so infectious that it left a lasting mark on his reign. He founded the city of Hadrianopolis, modern-day Edirne in Turkey, a testament to his admiration for Greek urban planning. And of course, there was his piece de resistance, the magnificent Pantheon in Rome, rebuilt under his watch. But that's a tale for another day. Now, let's address the toga parties and gladiator games myth. Sure, Romans loved a good spectacle, but being an emperor was less about partying and more about keeping the empire from crumbling like a poorly made baklava. Hadrian had to deal with revolts, notably the Bar Kokhba revolt in Judea, which kicked off in 132 AD and was no small skirmish. It took Hadrian nearly 3 years and significant resources to suppress the rebellion, resulting in a staggering toll on both sides. These were the harsh realities of ruling an empire that stretched from Britannia's chilly shores to the sun-drenched sands of Egypt. Speaking of harsh realities, Hadrian wasn't afraid to make unpopular decisions. Perhaps his most infamous move was pulling back Roman forces from Mesopotamia, territories that his predecessor Trajan had fought tooth and nail to acquire. Critics called it a retreat, but Hadrian saw it as strategic consolidation. It was a move that would have made even the most stoic senator sweat, but it allowed him to fortify Rome's borders and focus on internal stability. In the end, Hadrian was more than just the sum of his architectural blueprints. He was a complex character whose reign was marked by a blend of cultural admiration, political maneuvering, and a relentless drive to leave a legacy both in stone and in policy. As we unravel his story, remember that Hadrian's tale is not about the grandeur of Rome alone, but about the man who dared to dream in marble and mortar. Stay tuned, because Hadrian's journey is just getting started, and trust me, it's one for the history books. So, where were we? Ah, yes, Hadrian, the emperor with a penchant for architecture and a travel itinerary that would make even the most seasoned backpacker blush. Now, let's shift gears and talk about one of his most iconic projects, the formidable Hadrian's Wall. Picture a 73-mile-long stone serpent snaking its way across the rolling hills of northern Britain. Completed around 128 AD, this wall wasn't just a passive-aggressive way to tell the neighbors to keep their noise down. It was Rome's northernmost outpost, a literal line in the sand. Or rather, stone against the Picts and other tribes who were the ancient equivalent of rowdy neighbors. But how effective was this monumental barrier? Well, if you think about it, building a giant wall to keep out invaders sounds about as foolproof as using a screen door on a submarine. The Picts weren't exactly quaking in their boots. They were more than capable of climbing over, tunneling under, or simply walking around it. In fact, Hadrian's Wall was less about stopping invasions and more about showing the might and reach of Roman engineering. Talk about an ancient flex. Now, before you dismiss the wall as an expensive vanity project, let's explore its economic impact. Constructing this behemoth was no small feat. It took the labor of thousands of soldiers and skilled craftsmen working tirelessly in often harsh conditions. And we're not talking about a simple rock pile here. The wall included mile castles, watchtowers, and forts, turning the rugged landscape into a formidable military zone. The project provided a significant economic boost, creating jobs and stimulating trade in the region. Think of it as ancient Rome's version of a government stimulus package. But maintaining the wall was a different story. It required constant upkeep, which meant a steady stream of resources and manpower. This wasn't just a one-and-done deal. It was more like owning a classic sports car. Sure, it looks great, but the maintenance costs can make your eyes water. Yet, despite the ongoing expense, the wall served as a symbol of Roman order in the chaotic frontier. It was a tangible reminder of the empire's reach, a line drawn not just on the land, but in the minds of its people. Interestingly, Hadrian wasn't just fortifying the frontiers with stone and mortar. His construction endeavors stretched across the empire, from the majestic Pantheon in Rome to the vibrant city of Antinopolis in Egypt, founded in honor of his beloved companion Antinous. Hadrian's architectural projects were as much about asserting imperial power as they were about cultural expression. He was the original patron of public works, and his legacy would echo through ages. Now, let's talk numbers. Building Hadrian's Wall was a costly venture, but what's a few million denarii when you're the ruler of the known world? Estimates suggest the wall cost somewhere around 100 million sesterces, an amount that might have strained even the most generous imperial purse. But for Hadrian, it was an investment in Rome's stability. By fortifying the empire's borders and encouraging economic growth in the provinces, he was ensuring that the empire wouldn't just survive, it would thrive. The wall was a statement, a testament to Roman ingenuity and determination. And yet, for all its grandeur, Hadrian's Wall highlights the emperor's pragmatic side. He understood that in a sprawling empire, sometimes the best offense was a good defense. By consolidating Rome's territories and securing its borders, Hadrian could focus on internal development rather than endless expansion, a move that was both visionary and practical. It was a strategy that many emperors before him hadn't dared to try, opting instead for the glory of conquest over the stability of consolidation. In the grand tapestry of Roman history, Hadrian's building projects were more than just architectural wonders. They were the backbone of his vision for a united and enduring empire. Through mortar and stone, Hadrian not only shaped the physical landscape, but also the political and cultural ethos of Rome. His legacy would endure, a testament to a time when emperors dreamed in marble and dared to leave their mark on history. As we continue to unravel Hadrian's story, remember that his walls were more than mere barriers. They were bridges across the ages, connecting us to a past where the line between legend and reality was as fine as the edge of a Roman sword. Stay with us as we delve deeper into the emperor's legacy, for there's much more to explore in the world Hadrian built. Hadrian's life was a perpetual road trip, minus the selfies, but with all the pomp and circumstance of an imperial caravan. Imagine the logistics. Hundreds of soldiers, servants, and officials trailing behind the emperor as he trekked from one corner of his sprawling empire to another. Forget frequent flyer miles. Hadrian's passport would be stamped with more territories than a game of Risk. Over his 21-year reign, he spent more than half of it on the move, clocking in miles that would make even the most seasoned travel blogger envious. Now, why did Hadrian choose to become the Roman Empire's most famous wanderlust emperor? Was he just bored of Rome's pizza and pasta scene? Not quite. Hadrian's travels were a blend of political necessity and personal preference. He understood that ruling a colossal empire from a single marble throne in Rome was like trying to manage a multinational corporation from a beach hut in the Maldives. You had to be on the ground, shaking hands, kissing babies, and making sure the legions were happy and the roads were paved. Traveling across the empire wasn't just for show, it was strategic. Hadrian visited the provinces to reinforce Roman culture, law, and stability. Consider it an ancient PR campaign. In Britain, he inspected Hadrian's wall, ensuring it wasn't just a fancy pile of rocks, but a functioning defensive line. Over in Egypt, he marveled at the pyramids and founded the city of Antinopolis, which was less about urban planning and more a tribute to his beloved Antinous. Meanwhile, in Asia Minor, he made sure Roman infrastructure was up to scratch, with roads as smooth as politics allowed. These travels weren't just a series of photo ops. They were a hands-on approach to governance. But let's not sugarcoat it. Hadrian's travels weren't all smooth sailing. They were fraught with political minefields. Take his visit to Judea, for example, a region simmering with tension after the Bar Kokhba revolt. His attempts to solidify Roman control there were about as popular as a toga made of sandpaper. Insisting on Roman religious practices and banning Jewish customs only stirred the pot further. It was a classic case of an emperor trying to impose order with the subtlety of a rampaging elephant. Traveling wasn't cheap either. Hadrian's expeditions were bankrolled by Rome's coffers. The cost of transporting an imperial entourage across vast distances was astronomical. We're talking millions of sesterces, enough to make even the wealthiest senators raise an eyebrow. But Hadrian considered it an investment in the empire's unity. His presence in the provinces was a reminder that Rome was watching, that the emperor cared about the far-flung corners of his domain. It was governance by proximity, a strategy that offered both reassurance and a stern warning to would-be dissenters. And yet, for all his efforts, Hadrian's travels sometimes had unintended consequences. His attempts to Romanize distant provinces often clashed with local customs, creating friction and resistance. In places like Egypt and Judea, the imposition of Roman culture met with stubborn local traditions. It was a classic clash of civilizations, with Hadrian caught in the middle, trying to stitch together a patchwork empire with both Roman thread and local fabric. Hadrian's travels were also a personal journey. His love for Greek culture meant that wherever he went, he sought out theaters, temples, and philosophers. In Athens, he completed the construction of the Temple of Olympian Zeus, a project that had languished for centuries. To Hadrian, the city wasn't just another provincial stop. It was a cultural mecca, a place where his passion for Hellenistic ideals could flourish. His travels were as much about indulging his intellectual curiosity as they were about consolidating power. But let's dispel a myth. Hadrian wasn't just a tourist with a fancy title. His travels had real, tangible effects. By visiting different regions, he could assess local issues firsthand, resolve disputes, and make decisions that a million scrolls of correspondence never could. He was the ancient equivalent of a CEO doing site visits, ensuring that the empire's machinery ran smoothly from the British Isles to the banks of the Nile. Despite the romantic image of an emperor traversing his empire's vastness, Hadrian's journeys were no leisurely jaunt. They were a delicate balancing act, maintaining the illusion of omnipresence while managing the gritty realities of imperial rule. His travels were both a testament to his dedication and a reminder of Rome's vastness, a sprawling entity that required constant attention and intervention to keep from fracturing at the seams. In the grand scheme of things, Hadrian's travels were more than just footnotes in history. They were a critical component of his reign, a testament to his commitment to an empire that was not just Rome's but his. As we continue to explore Hadrian's legacy, remember that his journeys were more than mere excursions. They were the backbone of his vision for a stable and enduring empire, a dream woven through the landscapes of antiquity and into the annals of history. And so, our tale continues, with Hadrian's story unfolding across the miles and years, as we delve deeper into the world of an emperor who dared to walk the paths he ruled. And so, our tale continues, weaving through the labyrinth of ancient politics and personal affairs, as we delve into one of the most enigmatic chapters of Hadrian's life, his relationship with Antinous. Antinous, Hadrian's young companion, whose story is as tantalizing as a mystery novel with pages missing. If you thought the emperor's travels were intricate, just wait until you hear about his heart. Let's set the scene. It's the early 130s AD, and Hadrian, now an emperor seasoned by years of leadership and endless miles traveled, meets a young Bithynian named Antinous. Neither a senator nor a soldier, Antinous was a Greek youth who caught Hadrian's eye, and not just for his reputed beauty. This wasn't just a royal fling. It was a profound bond that transcended the norms of Roman relationships. For Hadrian, Antinous wasn't just arm candy. He was a companion, an intellectual peer, and perhaps even a muse. Now, let's address the pink elephant in the room, the nature of their relationship. In ancient Rome, same-sex relationships weren't exactly scandalous, but they came with their own set of societal norms and expectations. Yet, Hadrian's affection for Antinous seemed to go beyond the usual Roman boundaries. He flaunted their bond with a boldness that would have made the Roman Senate clutch their pearls, if they wore any, of course. But the story takes a tragic turn. In 130 AD, during a voyage on the Nile, Antinous drowned under mysterious circumstances. Was it an accident, an act of self-sacrifice, or something more sinister? The truth sank with him to the bottom of the river, leaving historians to speculate for centuries. What we do know is that Hadrian was devastated. His grief was like a Roman epic, grandiose and all-consuming. In the wake of Antinous' death, Hadrian did something extraordinary. He deified him. That's right, he turned his beloved companion into a god. Now, making someone a deity wasn't just a show of affection. It was a political masterstroke wrapped in a shroud of personal loss. By elevating Antinous to godhood, Hadrian ensured his memory would be immortalized across the empire. Temples were built, cities named in his honor, and coins minted with his image. It was a PR campaign that would make even the savviest modern political advisor nod with approval. But why go to such lengths? The answer lies in the intersection of personal grief and political strategy. By deifying Antinous, Hadrian wasn't just commemorating a lost love. He was reinforcing his own divine right to rule. In a world where emperors were often seen as gods on earth, aligning himself with a divine Antinous bolstered Hadrian's own semi-divine status. It was as if he was saying, if Antinous is a god, and I loved him, what does that make me? The cult of Antinous spread like wildfire. Shrines and statues popped up faster than new coffee shops in a gentrifying neighborhood. The city of Antinopolis was founded on the Nile's east bank, a living tribute to a life cut short. It became a cultural center, a hub for the worship of Antinous that attracted pilgrims like a rock concert in the desert. The city was more than a vanity project. It was an enduring symbol of Hadrian's vision, a blend of Greek and Egyptian styles reflecting the emperor's own cultural fusion. And let's not forget the economic implications. Religion in ancient Rome wasn't just a spiritual pursuit. It was an economic engine. The deification of Antinous created jobs, from priests to artisans crafting statues and coins. It stimulated trade as pilgrims traveled to Antinopolis, spending their denarii in the burgeoning city. Hadrian's homage was also a shrewd economic move, weaving his personal narrative into the empire's financial fabric. Yet, for all its grandeur, the cult of Antinous was not without its critics. Some saw it as an indulgence, a distraction from the empire's pressing issues. But Hadrian's strategy was simple. By deifying Antinous, he gave the people a new narrative, a divine story to unite them beyond politics and war. It was a classic case of using personal tragedy to foster collective identity, a lesson in leadership that echoes through history. So, was Hadrian's deification of Antinous a heartfelt tribute or a calculated political maneuver? The beauty of history is that it's rarely black and white. It's a rich tapestry woven with the threads of human emotion and ambition. Hadrian's actions were a testament to his complexity, embodying both the vulnerability of a grieving lover and the cunning of a seasoned ruler. As we continue to unravel Hadrian's legacy, remember that his story is one of contrasts, a tale where love and power, grief and glory intertwine. The emperor's journey is far from over, and as we delve deeper, the lines between legend and reality blur, revealing the true essence of a ruler who dared to love beyond the confines of mortality. Stay with us as we explore the world Hadrian built, a realm where the divine and the mundane danced in an empire that stretched across continents and eras. The next chapter awaits, promising yet more insights into the life of an emperor who, through grief and genius, left a mark on history that endures to this day. But the sands of time were relentless, and soon enough, Hadrian found himself facing the inevitable twilight of his reign. You see, even emperors can't escape the wear and tear of living, especially when you've been burning the candle at both ends, traversing the empire like it's a backyard garden. By the time he settled back into Rome, his health was, shall we say, less than imperial. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the ailment in the palace. Hadrian suffered from a mysterious illness that left him weak, irritable, and prone to mood swings that would make a Roman chariot race look like a stroll in the park. His health woes weren't just a personal inconvenience, they were a political hot potato. An emperor's strength was synonymous with the empire's might, and showing signs of weakness was like painting a target on the imperial toga. Enter the succession drama, stage left. Hadrian knew he had to secure the future of Rome, but choosing an heir wasn't as simple as picking the next contestant on who wants to be emperor. His first choice, Lucius Aelius, was a well-bred Roman with all the right connections, but none of the stamina. He died before Hadrian even had a chance to hand over the keys to the empire. With Aelius out of the picture, Hadrian had to make a move faster than a toga slipping off a wax statue. So, he turned to Antoninus Pius, a man with a name that sounds like a sneeze, but a reputation as solid as Roman concrete. And here's where Hadrian's political savvy came into play. By adopting Antoninus, he wasn't just ensuring a smooth transition, he was setting up a dynastic domino effect. Antoninus was required to adopt Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus as his successors, ensuring that the empire would be in capable hands for generations, or at least that was the plan. Now, let's talk legacy. Hadrian's reign wasn't just about building walls and mending borders. It was about laying the foundations for a stable future. His architectural feats, from the Pantheon's dome to the sprawling Villa Adriana, were as much about showcasing Roman ingenuity as they were about cementing his place in history. But behind the marble facades and meticulously planned cities, there lay a deeper ambition, to create a unified empire that could withstand the test of time. And yet, Hadrian's vision wasn't without its eccentricities. Some called him a visionary, others, an emperor with a few too many whims. He was known for his love of Greek culture, his fondness for traveling, and his penchant for micromanagement that would make a helicopter parent blush. But maybe that was the secret sauce to his success, a mix of strategic foresight and a dash of creative madness. Speaking of madness, let's not forget the economic realities of his reign. Hadrian's building projects were a double-edged sword. They stimulated local economies and showcased Roman might, but they also drained the imperial treasury faster than you can say denarius. His decision to consolidate Rome's borders rather than expand them was a pragmatic move, ensuring that resources were focused on internal stability rather than endless conquests. It was a strategy that prioritized long-term resilience over short-term glory, a rare commodity in the annals of imperial rule. As Hadrian's health deteriorated, he took refuge in his Villa Adriana, a sprawling estate that was less a retirement home and more a testament to his architectural genius. Imagine Versailles with a Roman twist, gardens, libraries, baths, and theaters, all meticulously arranged to reflect the emperor's eclectic tastes. It was here that Hadrian spent his final days, surrounded by the fruits of his labor and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. When Hadrian finally shuffled off this mortal coil in 138 AD, his death didn't just mark the end of an era, it signaled the beginning of a new chapter in Roman history. His policies laid the groundwork for the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that would endure long after his marble likeness had weathered the sands of time. So, was Hadrian a visionary leader or an eccentric dreamer? The answer, like most things in history, isn't black and white. He was both, a man of contradictions whose reign was defined by ambition, innovation, and a touch of madness. Hadrian dared to dream in marble and mortar, shaping an empire that was as much a reflection of his own complexity as it was a testament to Rome's enduring legacy. His story reminds us that history is a tapestry woven from the threads of human ambition and folly, where the line between legend and reality is as fine as the edge of a Roman sword. In the end, Hadrian left behind more than just walls and buildings. He left a blueprint for governance that balanced the needs of the many with the vision of the few. His legacy endures in the ruins of his architectural marvels and the echoes of his policies, a reminder that even the most ambitious dreams can leave a lasting mark on the world. And as we close the book on Hadrian's story, remember that history is never truly finished. It's a living narrative, shaped by the lives of those who dared to dream beyond the confines of their time.